Okay, so where do we begin? Our story starts with the rally that's supposed to take place later tonight. Okay, from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific time, I will be doing a rally. Change the party with Chakrabarty rally with Shoykat Chakrabarty, who's running for Nancy Pelosi's now unoccupied vacant seat. Pelosi goes she's decided not to run again, which is shocking to me. I don't know why she did that, but here is was there a brief F? Ugh, is the internet getting busted? Interesting. I can verify this too. Emily Ratajkowski liked the bathtub pig. I can't see it because I don't think I follow Emily Ratajkowski, but that's nice. Anyway, we're back, and since then, if there's any blips happening, obviously I will say 10 M Israel Chais and fix the situation. But since then, numerous articles have been written, and the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, the San Francisco Democratic Party, has come out. This guy, Matt Dorsey, who apparently is one of the most right-wing Democrats in San Francisco, member, San Francisco Board of Supervisors, District 6, has written this like crazy screed about how I must be publicly condemned. Okay? Change the party, the Democratic Party, Matt Dorsey writes. Call me crazy, but I think pro-terrorist, anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-AAPI, misogynist, xenophobic, politically repellent Hassan Piker fanboys should go form their own party and get the F out of ours. Here's my SF Democrats resolution. It proposes to 1, publicly oppose the genocidal jihadist terrorist organization Hamas, and 2, reaffirm one of our national Democratic party platform planks. That's pretty straightforward if you ask me. Now, it's ironic because it's not straightforward, because the bill is actually a fuck Hasanabi, Hamasabi condemnation bill, ironically enough. But he has to, make it seem like, the opposition that he has to me is the democratic pluralism, in order for, xenophobic too now. I'm anti-Asian and xenophobic, which I don't know how we arrived at that. Former San Francisco Police Department affiliate, Matt Dorsey, recovering addict, who apparently may or may not have had some issues with that. That's a journey that I do respect. That's a journey that I do admire. However, I don't admire Matt Dorsey. I didn't know who the fuck he was. But from what I understand, in the brief time period that I got to learn of him, he went from being a recovering addict to harming recovering addicts as a part of, throwing recovering addicts and addicts alike under the bus. Now, of course, the real reason, and this is not shocking to anyone, I hope, at this point, the real reason why he's fucking complaining about this shit is not because there is a significant disagreement, or he sincerely believes that I'm like a hate monger or anything like that. It's because of this. Here's Matt Dorsey. Zionism is the movement for self-determination and statehood for the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, the land of Israel. That's it. That's what Zionism is. In the Middle East, Israel is America's strongest ally, the region's only functional democracy, and the safest destination. How does this always happen? How does this always happen? Whenever people are like, I have very significant ideological disagreements. It's not just Israel. I mean, he's a dangerous Islamist fundamentalist who wants to destroy America and turn it into an Islamic caliphate. Whenever people say stuff like that, I'm immediately like, okay, let's go key search Israel in their previous tweets. It's always Israel. It's time to normalize Zionism and acknowledge that Israel's enemies are also America's Israel's, Am Israel Chai, American flag, Israeli flag, and then the LGBTQ plus flag. Huh. How did that happen? These people are basically servile dogs, okay? I'll say it out loud. They are fucking servile dogs to Israel. They would sell out their immediate family members if it meant getting another paycheck from a Zionist organization. Okay? That's it. You are yelling at a fucking guy who wants Medicare for all, who wants the Democratic Party to actually fight back against the Republican Party. You're not even a functioning Democrat at that point. And it's the same for Josh Gottheimer too. Right? Yay, I'm a self-proclaimed Zionist too. I support the right of the Jewish people and national self-determination in their historic homeland, the land of Israel, which is all Zionism means. I'm also a proud Democrat, the party of President Harry S. Truman, whose recognition of the state of Israel it's like this is what I mean. Like, these guys will be like, why are you so obsessed with Israel? And then write shit like this. Okay? It's like, big dog, you can't say I'm obsessed with Israel when there is no other country that you would behave like this for, okay? I don't ever want to think about Israel for the rest of my fucking life. It would be a beautiful, beautiful world to live in if I didn't have to think about Israel. But unfortunately, it's servile dogs in American politics do their very best to make sure it's always top of mind. Okay? And for the record, the GOAT, Gideon Levy, also wrote, Zionism didn't go wrong. It was always built this way. Of course, you will never see an op-ed like this in a Western newspaper. And someone who says stuff like this, me, Hasanabi Piker, consistently gets called a fucking rabid anti-Semite, a virulent anti-Semite for this exact take. Okay? Dorsey criticized the city's harm reduction approach to drug use, calling for mass arrests of drug users in the South Market neighborhood and placing them in a compulsory detox and treatment in 2025. Interesting position for a recovering drug addict to take. Yeah, I mean, these guys sell everything out. That's why I always say Israel's a pretty good fucking litmus test. Okay? If you are going to dick ride a foreign country this hard, then yeah, you have no principles, you have no values, you're bought and paid for. Okay? You could literally be a fucking recovering drug addict and sell out recovering drug addicts, ruin their lives further with unbelievably draconian policies that you implement. That's why I say Israel is a pretty fucking reliable litmus test. That's why I also say, whenever you hear people chirp at me from any angle, not just like back in the day, there were different angles, right? It was a pretty good metric. It was a pretty reliable metric to see if someone is, what do you call it? Back in the day, it was a pretty reliable metric to see if someone is actually a right winger, like how much they obsess over me, whatever. Nowadays, it's not just right wingers, it's liberals as well. Okay? And it is basically, I've become this figurehead for people who lose their minds over defending this unbelievably unpopular ethno-state that has done a genocide. Go key search Israel, Gaza, genocide in the profiles of my naysayers, and you will very quickly realize, like, the overwhelming majority, almost like fucking 99%, 99% of them are pro-Israel. It's incredible. And they don't have like a normal approach to the subject either. They lose their fucking minds. They will go to lengths that I've never even experienced before in an effort to try and smear me, smear this movement, attack this movement in general, attack anyone associated with people like ourselves. I don't know what else to say. I said, buddy, if I was any of those things, you'd be courting my vote as a moderate swing voter. My position on Israel is not just the overwhelming majority position of the Democrats, it's the majority position in the country. Okay? And of course, a lot of people got frustrated with that. I'm anti-Israel and I just hate you for the love of the game. Yeah, the only people who are anti-Israel who hate me are either neo-Nazis or the ultras, like the MAGA communists who are, in my opinion, just opportunists for the most part. They will align with anyone and everyone like Andrew Tate or any of these like unbelievably reactionary conspiracy theorists in an effort to try to brand themselves as like outside of the box thinkers and shit like that. Those are the only people who like sincerely claim to hate Israel, but also genuinely have a lot of hate for me as well in their hearts. But it's over. This is Kurt Mills from American Conservative Magazine. A Pew Research Center survey in March found that 57% of Republicans under 50 have an unfavorable view of Israel. It is now the majority of Republicans under the age of 50 as well. It's over. It's never been more over than it is right now. But these guys won't stop trying to punish critics of Israel. Anyway, so San Francisco, your call out of Obama did very well with blue sky liberals. Oh, hell yeah. Wait, 1,600 likes? That's good. That's very well. It's really crazy how this is considered an extreme take. Will we be checking out our dark woke general on Blue Sky? That's good. Okay. Anyway, so San Francisco Chronicle wrote about this. Said Hassan Piker to join SF rally for Shoikat Chakrabarty's congressional campaign. The backlash has already started. Hassan Piker, popular but controversial left-wing political commentator, is scheduled to join San Francisco congressional candidate Shoikat Chakrabarty for a Thursday rally to boost his campaign to succeed Representative Nancy Pelosi. I think I brick a lot of people's brains, by the way. And I think part of the reason why I brick a lot of people's brains is because while the things that I say are unbearably woke, which Democrats fucking hate because they're right-wing, corporate centrist Democrats who will never actually advance left-wing economic populism. So they think like they should just concede on the culture war stuff and become more like the Republican Party because they assume that that is the only popular way to win over support. So they'll literally say, I'm too fucking woke. But then the way I talk and the way I look is not very woke. The way I carry myself and the language that I communicate with is oftentimes even vulgar. It's very passionate. And therefore, they will turn around and be like, he's actually not woke. So on the one hand, they'll be like, oh, this guy's too woke for the Democrats. On the other hand, they'll say, he's an unbelievably racist guy. He's a really racist guy. He's really fucked up. He does, he doesn't issue trigger warnings before he uses vulgar language. It's like, okay, so which is it? Am I woke or am I fucking right wing? Am I too woke and I'm pulling the Democratic Party in a too woke direction? Or am I not woke at all, which is something that you demanded the Democrats actually lean into, right? So which is it? The backlash from Chuck Still, progressive candidates in close races around the country have welcomed Piker's support in recent years, including a competitive congressional primary in Michigan this year. Chakrabarty, a wealthy former tech engineer running a progressive campaign to replace Pelosi, is betting Piker's support will endear him to his legion of online followers. The pair have already posted multiple videos together chatting about policy and sharing takeout from the popular Arabic restaurant Beit Rima. Thursday's Change the Party rally will be the first joint public appearance. Other candidates endorsed by Justice Democrats, a progressive political group co-founded by Chakrabarty that works to help insurgent progressives in Democratic primaries, will also appear at the event. Chakrabarty has been critical of how the Democratic Party has responded to President Donald Trump and called for party leaders to move in a more progressive direction. But Chakrabarty's critics and opponents have criticized them for courting Piker's support. On Wednesday, Supervisor Matt Dorsey said he plans to submit a resolution to his colleagues on the governing board of the San Francisco Democratic Party condemning Piker's vile, wildly divisive, widely condemned rhetoric and urging Chakrabarty to clarify if and how his views differ from Piker's. Should the resolution receive support from a majority of party board leaders, it would reject any effort to change our Democratic Party into a movement that accommodates in any way or condones Hassan Piker's divisive brand of anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-AAPI, terrorist coddling, hate espousing, misogynist, xenophobic, obscene, and politically repellent viewpoints. The party board won't convene to vote on the resolution until later this month, but Dorsey said in a text message to Chronicle that he felt it necessary to elevate it sooner rather than later. He's like, we have to get this done right now. This is the number one priority for San Francisco Democrats. You understand? It's not about the imminent housing crisis and probably the more long-standing approach to combating homelessness in the city. It's not addressing the inflation crisis that harms many people in San Francisco. It's actually the fact that this fucking Twitch streamer hurts my feelings and I can't stand it. He has been very mean to my emotional support apartheid state doing a genocide. He's been very mean to Israel, so we're just going to fucking yell at him. Anti-AIPI cooked for using Swagapino? No, it's because there was that one reactionary MAGA supporter that was Vietnamese, if you recall. And I was like, suck my dick, old lady. I don't give a fuck what your background is or something like that. And she was like, oh, I love Donald Trump. Donald Trump's going to save this country in the 2020 election. How the fuck did they find a video that they clipped out of context from the 2020 election, by the way, when I was loudly in support of Joe Brandon against Donald Trump, ironically enough. These guys are Democrats, by the way. Yeah, Matt Dorsey was tweeting about Richard Hanania's book 2 weeks ago. Every single one of these fucking loser freaks love Richard Hanania, an actual white supremacist. Not me, an actual white supremacist, a race realist, okay? But Richard Hanania is pro-Israel, and Richard Hanania is no longer as openly supportive of the Republican Party because he realized the Republicans are fucking idiots, and he realized he could just like lean into the dumbass fucking liberals who will eat this shit up. They'll be like, oh, you wrote extensively about the genetic inferiority of black people, but you're also pro-Israel and pro-liberal Democratic Party now? Well, guess what? You're fine in my book. Richard Hanania, who helped write Project 2025, these Democrats are aligned with Richard Hanania, but they hate me. So who do they really represent? The same thing goes for Scott Wiener, by the way. He said the exact same bullshit. Scott Wiener went on Richard Hanania's podcast. Again, a guy who is literally not only an active white supremacist, a race realist, but a guy who has defended Jeffrey Epstein. This is Richard Hanania. And yet, these Democrats do not shy away from associating with Richard Hanania, but on the other hand, condemn me. Very interesting. Perhaps the only litmus test that they're applying is whether they're pro-Israel or not. In any case, let's continue. Dorsey said he's worried about the party's future, but he doesn't want the solution to mean elevating toxicity and divisiveness, as he believes Chakrabarti is doing that by featuring Parker at the rally. When I see somebody who's endeavoring to change the Democratic Party with principles that are just anathema to what our party is about and what could be really destructive to our ability to ever win a majority in this country, I think we have to call that out, Dorsey said. Tiffany Bradley, a spokesperson for Chakrabarti's campaign, responded to Dorsey's resolution in a statement Wednesday. Voters are facing dire crises, including rising costs of war and erosion of their civil rights by an authoritarian government, she said. And the Democratic Party is failing to respond to this crisis and is polling at some of its lowest numbers in decades. The only option we have left is to use the democratic process to change our party. So if you see a rally of Democrats trying to inspire people to get involved as a threat, then you're part of the problem, Bradley said. Boom. Fantastic. No notes. Fantastic statement. In April, the Republican National Committee resurfaced videos in which Piker expressed irritation with first generation, second generation, third generation Asian people who are dogs to white people. Supervisor Connie Chan, another candidate running against Chakrabarti, who was born in Hong Kong, condemned the rhetoric in a statement at the time. It is disappointing. Yeah, I was talking about Asian people who were being used in the anti-affirmative action decision, by the way. Think about that. Think about how fucking annoying this is. That's anti-Asian? Really? That's anti-Asian? That I'm fucking shitting on? I'm shitting on people that are presenting themselves as reasonable critics, Asian critics of DEI and affirmative action? Really? Yeah, don't be a fucking slave to white people then. Like, what do you mean? Don't advance white supremacy. It's that fucking simple. Why is this in any way, shape, or form, why is that sentiment considered anti-Asian? You know what's actually anti-Asian? Anti-fucking affirmative action initiatives and anti-DEI initiatives. That's what's fucking anti-Asian. So guess what? The Asian people that worked with those white supremacists to tackle affirmative action in college campuses, you advanced the agenda of the Trump regime. You advanced the agenda that is now actively saying if you're not white in a position of power, you didn't deserve it. That is what I oppose. Okay? Yeah, I despise Thomas Sowell. Does that mean I'm anti-black? I find Candace Owens' views to be morally repugnant. Does that mean I'm white supremacist? Does that mean I'm anti-black? Or am I opposing white supremacy? Stop playing this fucking bullshit game. This is unbelievably reactionary. And the very fact that people are using knowingly using the Republican National Committee's resurfaced videos as Democrats is disgusting to me. Okay? You're a fucking dupe. You're either cynically taking advantage of this or you're a goddamn dupe. Yeah, I'm so anti-Asian. That's why I'm appearing alongside Shoykat Chakrabarti. That's why it's such a funny fucking line of attack. Am I anti-Asian or am I too in favor of aligning and having a cooperative relationship with China? Which one is it? Yeah, I'm too pro-China, but also anti-Asian at the same time. I don't know. I don't know how this works. Again, perhaps it doesn't fucking matter. Perhaps it doesn't matter at all. Perhaps it's just a cynical line of attack. And that's precisely what it is. You're on Fox News today. The fuck is this? Supervisor Connie, I think this is a very cynical line of attack to get one on Shoykat Chakrabarti. It's a little disappointing, especially considering that I know a lot of people that, have positive feelings about Connie Chan. And it would be shocking to me if Connie Chan disagreed with my assessment here about affirmative action and DEI initiatives and how sometimes Asian people play a willing role in advancing white supremacist values. I don't think she's in favor of that. I'm not in favor of that. That's who I'm criticizing. Piker has stood by some of his most incendiary comments, including those about Asian immigrants, though he said those remarks have been taken out of context. While my sentiment is vulgar, I stand on my principles, Piker told Political Playbook in April, explaining that he had been speaking about a Supreme Court decision striking down affirmative action. I'm talking for 10 hours every single day, 7 days a week. Of course, there's going to be opportunities to clip me out of context. Responding to Dorsey's criticism in the social media post on Friday, Piker said his position on Israel is not just the overwhelming majority position of the Democrats, it's the majority position in the country. Piker's also been an outspoken and highly controversial critic of the Israeli government and what he describes as genocide. What I describe as genocide? You mean the United Nations? You mean what Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, the Israeli humanitarian organization, and virtually every fucking international body has considered a genocide, has openly called a genocide? It's not what my description is. Okay, it's the description of it's the description of every fucking institution that is tasked with dealing with this kind of stuff. Anyway, suggesting Israel deserved the October 7th attack. I did not do that. But in any case, many of them civilians. He's also said reports that Hamas and rape women during the attacks don't matter or change the dynamic for me. Piker's also spoken out against anti-Semitism and described it as a hate crime. Dorsey, who has maintained his staunch support for Israel, also wrote in the resolution that Chakrabarti should publicly acknowledge Hamas to be a genocidal terrorist organization and suggested that Piker and his fans should pursue the formation of their own party and get out of ours. Yeah, this is an unbelievable, packed, incredibly biased last paragraph there. I said, Hassan said Israel deserved October 7. Hassan said, it doesn't matter if rapes happen. Just leaving it at that. Incredible stuff. Obviously, you do understand, though, identity gets removed from any class context and then leveraged to forward the interests of power. You are racist if you critique Owens or Obama for his body count, and you are a commie terrorist if you advocate for working class interests. It hasn't changed much over the years. I know. I'll keep fucking saying what I'm saying, though, because I've been saying this for years. I've been saying everything that I've said in the last couple of years for this past decade. Okay? And guess what? More and more people are finally comprehending it as a direct consequence of the contradictions worsening, as a direct consequence of material conditions worsening for working class folks. Okay? And that's the reason why there is an unbelievable amount of attacks right now, as opposed to ever before in my entire career. Okay? They're attacking me because the message is finally penetrating collective consciousness. One of the greatest examples of this is obviously on the issue of Israel. And that's precisely the reason why these guys are attacking so aggressively, because they can't attack, one, they can't really attack the message, so they have to shoot the messenger. And two, they can't attack the large subsects of the voting population that also have identical, if not very similar points of view, and maybe even identical language at times, right? So they can't discipline the voters, so they try to discipline someone who's popular with the voters, or at least a subsect of the voters, right? That's what it is. And that's the reason why they're doing it. I know exactly why they're doing it. Fuck them. Okay? Anyway, another thing that I've been talking about over and over again is the war effort. Operation Epstein's Fury is now at day 69. Okay? It's day 69 of Operation Epic Fury. If you've been in here since day one of Operation Epic Fury, or at least since the first week of Operation Epic Fury, you know that things have not been going well. I've been talking about it extensively, as a matter of fact. Yes, nice. And it turns out more and more people are finally coming to that conclusion as well, even though Donald Trump is the one guy who refuses to acknowledge it. I'm going to go pee while this runs.
More apparent contradictions from the Trump administration over the war with Iran. President Trump claimed the U.S. had, quote, won, though he also said no peace deal has been reached. We've also learned an American fighter jet fired on an Iranian oil tanker. The Pentagon says it was trying to slip past the U.S. blockade. Weijia Jiang is at the White House. Weijia, good morning.
Vlad, good morning, and good morning to everybody. We have heard this optimism from President Trump before, and the threats that come with a lack of progress. Trump warns the U.S. will hit Iran with more attacks at a much higher level and intensity if a peace deal is not reached.
So I think we won.
Promoting a UFC match scheduled at the White House for next month, President Trump declared victory in another fight against Iran.
We've had very good talks over the last 24 hours. And it's very possible that we'll make a deal.
According to a report from Axios, White House officials believe they are getting close to an agreement with Iran on a one-page memorandum to end the war and start more detailed negotiations. The deal would include a moratorium on Iran's nuclear enrichment, the lifting of U.S. sanctions, and both sides ending restrictions in the Strait of Hormuz. An Iranian official said the proposal is being reviewed. Trump insisted Iran has already signed off on his key condition.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and they won't. And they've agreed to that.
Iran has not said that publicly, and Trump lamented its leaders have backed off past agreements.
We've had some good talks before, as you know. Right. And all of a sudden, the next day, they're like, they forgot what happened.
After one day, the president paused his proposed Project Freedom after apparently only guiding very few ships through the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon said a U.S. Navy F/A-18 Super Hornet, like this one, launched from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, continued to inform.
Yes, we are getting ready for another attack. Breaking. 5 U.S. Air Force KC-135 tankers have taken off from the UAE with at least 4 more tankers airborne over Israel and Jordan. One going dark with transponders off. Trump separately did not appear a scheduled press event with the Brazilian president that was set for over 3 hours ago with no explanation given. Project Freedom was an unbelievable fuck-up, says Matthew Petty. The blockade put time on Washington's side, but in the course of the weekend, Trump demonstrated that he was 1, impatient, 2, scared of markets, 3, unwilling or unable to protect the idea of Dubai. Explosions have been overheard over Tehran, from what I understand, but it's unclear whether or not those were related to like American and Israeli bombing campaigns. Bahman Pier on Iran's Qasem Island targeted following an exchange of fire between the Iranian armed forces and the enemy, says Fars News. So I guess there's more updates on that since then. The idea of Dubai, yes, it's a joke. Several large transports or tankers have left the California AFB Air Force Base headed west today as well. So, yeah. Donald Trump, 7 days out from the Beijing summit, went back and forth on possibly securing a peace, an enduring peace, or going back to waging war with Iran. There was the Operation Freedom, Guardian, Prosperity, Freedom, whatever the fuck they call it, where he was going to transit ships through the Strait of Hormuz with naval assets in tow. That lasted for about 24 hours, not even 24 hours. That was announced, and in 24 hours, it was discontinued. Donald Trump said, okay, we now have another deal on the table. We're going to be having a conversation with Iran again. And it turns out that Tehran did not like the conditions that America set forth. So America seemingly is bringing back the bombing campaign, which didn't fucking work from the start. We are on day 69 of monitoring the situation. Gas prices have reached alarming levels all around the country. Energy markets are screaming bloody murder. And yet, oh God, I gotta stop saying day 69. An American official just told Al Jazeera the reports about preparations to resume Project Freedom are false. Do with that what you will. I don't know, says Bonser Berry. Wall Street Journal says Saudi Arabia and Kuwait lifted restrictions on U.S. military access to bases and airspace. The Trump administration is now looking to restart Project Freedom after it had paused it after 36 hours this week. U.S. officials said it isn't clear when that could happen, though Pentagon officials gave a timeline of as early as this week. Okay? Why bring the counter back today, man? You know why, because I'm also a dumbass. Tasnim says sounds of several explosions heard near Qasem Island. And by the way, since then, Tasnim, or Fars, has said this was enemy bombing campaigns in Qasem Island. So, yeah. There are currently 5 tankers in the air from Tel Aviv and 5 from UAE right now, with another 1 tanker over Iraq. There's also 1 tanker that has shut off its transponder. So everything points to America resuming Project Epstein's Fury, Project Epic Fortnite Freedom, whatever this iteration of the war efforts against Iran are called. Of course, there's also new reports coming from John Hudson, national security reporter for Washington Post, who has a scoop. Says a confidential new CIA analysis delivered to the policymakers this week concludes that Iran can survive the U.S. naval blockade for at least 3 to 4 months before facing more severe economic hardship, a finding that contradicts those hailing an imminent collapse. U.S. intel also indicates that Iran retains about 75% of its pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and about 70% of its pre-war stockpiles of missiles, per a U.S. official. This is increasingly becoming exactly like my Israel-Palestine, Gaza genocide coverage, where we look at initial open source intelligence assessments, we analyze the Iranian strike capabilities by looking at the targets and looking at their success in terms of penetrating the Israeli security umbrella, and we make different. We conduct analysis off of that information as opposed to the overwhelming majority of information coming from mainstream media. And that's the reason why at the Piker Broadcasting Service, I say you get tomorrow's news today, right? This assessment only confirms our analysis here. Our analysis here that has been conducted for, and I've been talking about for fucking months at this point, okay, for next month's news today, basically. If you were to look at the strike, if you were to analyze the strike capabilities of Iran by simply looking at how capable they are in successive strikes on Israeli soil, on the Gulf nations, and what targets they've been able to actually successfully hit, you would realize a very different reality exists on the ground as opposed to what people are hearing about in the Western world. U.S. intel also indicates that, I mean, this is great, though. It's basically confirmation. The CIA is basically confirming what we have seen and what we've been talking about for the past 2 months now. Again, day 69. Basically, since day 7, we've known that this American military campaign, this aerial bombardment campaign, was not succeeding in achieving any of the military objectives, as far as successfully attriting Iranian strike capabilities, right? U.S. intel also indicates that Iran retains about 75% of its pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and about 70% of its pre-war stockpiles of missiles, per a U.S. official. The regime has also been able to recover underground storage facilities and repair damaged missiles. This week, Trump painted a more dire picture of Iran's situation, saying their economy is crashing, their currency is worthless, and their missiles are mostly decimated. But U.S. intelligence offers a much more sobering assessment. One of the U.S. officials said they thought Iran's capacity to sustain prolonged economic hardship is far greater than even the current CIA estimate. The leadership has gotten more radical, more determined, and increasingly confident they can outlast the U.S. political will and sustain domestic repression to check any resistance inside Iran, the official said. Comparatively, you see similar regimes lasting years under sustained embargoes and air power-only wars. White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly defended the blockade's effectiveness. Iran was crushed militarily. Now they're being strangled economically and losing $500 million per day, thanks to the U.S. military's successful blockade of Iranian ports. This has been a spectacular fuck-up, and anyone who is a little bit reasonable could see it from week one, okay? At some point, you have to realize, like, there's not much daylight between Asmongold's base style reporting on the matter and a lot of mainstream media outlets that, you know, have foundation for defending democracy folks on, or pro-war, war hawk neocons on their broadcasts over and over again. Democratic neocons such as Brett McGurk or Amos Hochstein, architects of the Gaza genocide on the Democratic side, to go on CNN and deliver the exact same bullshit that the Trump administration is saying with a liberal spin on it. If you go to these places and if you hear from these people, of course they're going to say, no, we're doing a spectacular fucking job. Mark Ames also has some choice words on this. The Team B counterpoint here is whatever the FDD Israel lobby says, just a few more blockade days, plus a few more bombing sorties, and the defeated regime is over. And though they're always wrong, presidents have a funny habit of going for the best massage Team B intelligence. We don't even need to see the dust settling to recognize that FDD is a cutout for Israeli intelligence, and their goals are not the goals of advancing America's interests, okay? Their goals are to advance the interests of Israel. And it's very clear that the president and many in his closest circle are listening to these fucking idiots. The White House has literally used FDD policy papers in their communications throughout this war. Okay? They recently hired a FDD analyst to be a part of the negotiations team. It's ridiculous. They're leaning further and further into faulty Israeli intelligence, like it's their last-ditch effort to salvage the war effort somehow. It's not working. It's been a spectacular failure. It's been a major humiliation for American force projection capabilities, and yet they keep leaning into it. Yeah, I responded to Tommy Vitor. These neocon lunatics think taking down the Iranian regime is worth risking the Strait of Hormuz being closed for 8 months. Meanwhile, gas prices go up exponentially, entire economies in Asia collapse, and fertilizer shortages lead to famine. I said, good thing they put one of the FDD guys on the negotiations team. We clearly weren't sufficiently representing Israel's interests before. Tommy Vitor says, an org backed by autocrats who don't give a fuck about democracy. Perfect. You mean they just got a Mossad agent in the negotiation talks? What do you mean just now? They've already had Israel's interests sufficiently being represented in those negotiations. Okay? And on top of that, they also have Benjamin Netanyahu doing boss calls to Donald Trump with regular fucking frequency anyway. And on top of that, Israel blows up Beirut as they did yesterday in an effort to spoil the potential ceasefire. Yeah. Matt Petty says, at this rate, soon we'll be hearing that 110% of Iranian missiles survived the war. Yeah, the helpers.
Yeah.
Trump's new Iran negotiator is Israel's lobbyist who has denounced negotiations with Iran. Tapped to advise the special envoy for peace missions, Steve Witkoff, Nick Stewart previously condemned dealing with any of Iran's elected leaders. Okay, that's the guy.
Yeah.
Let's hear what he has to say about negotiating with Iran. This is the guy who was hired, by the way, to be a part of the Trump negotiations team this past week.
And I want to stay with you because this is Unga Week in New York City, the UN General Assembly, and Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian is running around New York, touting diplomacy, and I'm a reformer, and the media is magnifying that exactly as Iran had hoped. They even brought out Zarif from retirement, right? So there is this narrative that Iran is turning the chapter on, the butcher of Tehran, and there's a new president, there's a new reformer in town. Obviously, it's not. It shouldn't be much of a newsflash. Pezeshkian is a part of the theocratic, tyrannical, authoritarian government of Iran. Right? This man is not a reformer, and we shouldn't buy into that narrative, because what it does is it throws us off our guard, and we think, oh, this is different. This is a new. What do you say to that? Because that impacts policy, right? If we think that we have an honest broker across the table, we are coming to the table with a completely different mindset, and I think it's important we disabuse people of that notion. Speak to that, and I think if anybody else wants to chime in on this too.
If Mr. Pezeshkian is a reformer, then I'm, Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, next to Elliot Abrams, another fucking ghoul, but, real who's who of demonic entities here. Oh, God, just warmongers of the highest order. Listen, this was before the Queen died, I think. So, yeah. In any case, the point here is America is already representing the interests of Israel, even if the Israeli interest in this circumstance very clearly diverges from American interests. America, as the hegemon, has a totally different set of interests and a totally different set of obligations to the rest of the world. Its number one reason for existence is number one justification for 800 military bases around the world is the idea that they can be anywhere all at once, anywhere around the world in a matter of 24 to 48 hours, and they can dominate anyone militarily if a country dares impede on the free flow of commerce. Okay? So either militarily or through diplomacy, America must maintain free flow of commerce through these routes like the Strait of Hormuz. And if they can't do this militarily, as they've shown they're incapable of opening the Strait of Hormuz militarily, they have to go the route of diplomacy. Okay? Their obligation is not just to the American domestic markets. Their obligation is not just to Americans. Their obligation is to the rest of the world, right? And they have failed in achieving this clear-cut, well-defined, long-standing objective. This is why I keep repeating over and over again that America might say they're isolationist. The American administration might say or claim that they're isolationist, but America touches everything around the world. Okay? They have an obligation to their partners in the Asian markets to ensure safe passage of oil tankers so that these Asian countries do not fall apart. Asian countries that are responsible for the overwhelming majority of component manufacturing that American and Western countries also utilize in their production. Okay? The global system of capitalism and international trade is designed to never allow for this kind of impediment to continue for a long period of time. Because if it does, everything collapses. We saw a version of this with COVID, right? But this is man-made. This crisis is directly born out of America's and Israel's military ambitions in Iran. But America and Israel have different interests here. Israel's goal is not to open the Strait of Hormuz. Israel doesn't give a fuck about opening the Strait of Hormuz. Israel doesn't care if the Gulf nations are crippled. Israel actually benefits if the Gulf nations are crippled, whereas the rest of the world does not. The rest of the world does not benefit if the Gulf is lit on fire or if the Strait of Hormuz is blockaded, right? America, as the hegemon, must open the Strait of Hormuz, must allow international trade to continue in this pre-blockade levels, in the pre-blockade, pre-crisis levels that we're now experiencing. Do you understand? This is why I say Israel and America do not have goals that converge in this circumstance, but diverge from one another, okay? There's friction. But the American administration acts as though there is no friction whatsoever. The American administration acts as a pliant admin that will be willing participants in whatever Israel's design is in the region. And that is where we arrive at this issue. There are plenty of people making the reasonable assessment on the intelligence side, whether it be the CIA, on the State Department side, plenty of generals that have explained over and over again to Donald Trump that if they continue along this journey, that the crisis will only grow. There's only one option out of this to stop the hemorrhage, to stop the bleeding, and that is diplomacy. Okay? Everything points in that direction. And yet, there's one country that is no longer just a junior partner in this coalition, but seemingly behaving like the senior partner, Israel, that does not want diplomacy to take place. They do not want a sovereign Iran. I've said this from day one. Israel's goals since day one was very clear. It is the complete destruction, or at least the balkanization, or at least a failed state in Iran, turning Iran into Libya. Okay? That was Israel's goal. And by way of lying to the American leadership, if you want to, say that was the reason, I'm sure that played a big role here. And by way of consistently sullying ceasefire negotiations or attempts at long-standing peace by blowing up Beirut and continuing to escalate militarily, Israel has made it virtually impossible for America to have any sort of reasonable negotiations with Iran until the United States of America says enough is enough and brings Israel to heel. Okay? Israel is the destabilizing factor here. It's not Iran. And now it seems like we're leaning in the direction of more warfare, more destabilization, more crisis. Once again, Iranian state media says the United Arab Emirates has now attacked Iran. This is Mer. An explosion occurred at the Bahman Pier in Keshem during an exchange of fire between the Iranian forces and the enemy, and now they're saying it was the United Arab Emirates. Iran will dish out a heavy price to the United Arab Emirates. 100%. From their perspective, they have to create military deterrence to ensure that this stops. This is how states conduct themselves. Okay? If the UAE is foolish enough to engage Iran militarily like this, thinking that America will defend them, Iran will stop at nothing to show them that that is not the case. Iran will pull out all the fucking stops to ensure that the United Arab Emirates understands that America is not capable of defending them. Here's Uncle Chunk Weigert on the Sean Ryan show talking about Israel's attempts at spoiling this deal.
And we haven't hit what I think is the worst part of the war that's coming up. If we don't get the hell out of there, this is going to be an economic collapse like people have not seen. So why is Israel doing this? Number one, they want to take southern Lebanon, and this is all a giant distraction. Number two, they want the Iranians destroyed so they can't fund Hamas, Hezbollah, et cetera. So it's all about their interest, not our interest. But the parts people don't talk about, they just opened up the Leviathan gas field. For the first time, Israel now has a source of energy. And after the war starts, Netanyahu goes and brags on air, well, now that all those the strait is closed and the other things are foreclosed, you're going to have to rely on Leviathan and Israel.
Holy shit.
Okay. And when the world falls apart and we lose all of our allies, we lose NATO, we lose the Middle East, we lose everyone, Israel then says, we're your only ally. See, the rest of the world hates you. Well, why do they hate us? Because we did the shit you wanted us to do.
I think everybody sees what's happening. Everybody sees the negotiators being killed by Israel.
I'm not so certain that everybody sees what's happening. I think a lot of people are not paying attention at all, if I'm being real. I think a lot of people are totally deluded, understandably focused on their own day-to-day issues, and are not exactly aware. Their only experience Their only experience with what's going on over there is the gas prices. They see the gas prices, they go, what the fuck is this? Why am I paying $70 more to fill up my tank? This is unbearable. What the hell's going on? Fix it. But it doesn't go beyond that. They don't really think about how we arrived at this predicament. I'll be real. And there are those who connect those dots, people like myself, and we get yelled at endlessly by those who want to keep the public confused, oblivious, sedated.
And everybody sees it but us, but we see it. But our leadership, this administration, Trump, they don't acknowledge it. But I would just...
At least they shift the blame over correctly to Donald Trump, because this is Donald Trump's spectacular fuck up, right? Donald Trump has played a major role in this fuck up. He is one of the primary responsible parties for the gas prices being the way that they are. But one must scratch the surface and look at who has also convinced Donald Trump that this would be a good idea. And therein lies the truth. It's absolutely Israel. Early reports and Donald Trump's statements, Marco Rubio's statements, caused people to recognize that reality. Even the New York Times' Maggie Haberman wrote extensively on the dynamic between the Israeli envoys and the Israeli intelligence, and how it differed from America's homegrown intelligence assessment. Whether it be the CIA or the entire intelligence community, or Donald Trump's own generals telling him that this would be a devastatingly bad decision to go to war with Iran. But it didn't matter. You have to look at who stands to benefit from what's going on currently. The rest of the world is damaged. The rest of the world suffers a global energy crisis, destabilization, inflation everywhere as a direct consequence of the manufacturing base of the planet no longer able to receive the necessary energy so they can keep up with demands, so they can maintain a steady flow of supply, so that commerce can continue. You have airline carriers, like airlines in Europe, reducing their flights. This will impact deliveries as well. America is seen as the responsible party for this quagmire. So America's position as the hegemon is threatened. Only one country benefits here. And they don't even benefit in the long run, but they at least benefit in the short run, because this allows them to take out one of their significant adversaries in the region that could potentially be a sufficient deterrence to their greater Israel project. The country that benefits is Israel. And yet, we continue.
Of course, the U.S. blockade, shooting out the rudder of an Iranian oil tanker that the Pentagon said ignored, quote, multiple warnings to stay out of an Iranian port.
President Trump insisted the agreement would also include the U.S. extracting Iran's highly enriched uranium, which is a key component for building a nuclear weapon. When he told us the same thing last month, Iran responded by saying it would not be transferred anywhere under any circumstances. Gail.
All right, Weisha, thank you.
Day 69 of the war has been a day of some optimism at the idea that there may be some sort of peace agreement, at least temporarily, between Iran and the United States starting sometime next week. If that's the case, then we'll all be very glad. But there are a couple of big spoilers in this that we should also be aware of. One, of course, is Lebanon, the war within a war. The Israelis are determined to try to finish off Hezbollah. They've got a very clear agenda to do this, whatever else happens in the war. And to that end, they've been increasing their attacks as Hezbollah have been aiming rockets at Israel. And yesterday, they attacked Beirut, southern Beirut, downtown Beirut again, and pictures of that came through today. They said that they were going after a Hezbollah command center, maybe it was, but the fact that they went into Beirut itself shows that the Israelis are determined to do as much damage to Hezbollah as they can in the days still remaining to them if there is a peace deal between Tehran and Washington. If they can't do that, then the thing they're also determined to do is to consolidate their security zone. Now, this is their security zone running inside the southern part of Lebanon. We've seen that before. We saw it between 1982 and the year 2000. But this time, look at it. It goes much further to the northeast than it ever did before. It includes Mount Hermon, the Syrian edge of Mount Hermon. The Israelis occupy Syrian territory on Mount Hermon. They've refused to give it up. The Syrians protest, but they take no notice. They also put military outposts between 5 and 10 kilometers inside Syrian territory. It's obvious why the Israelis are doing that. They want to protect the northern flank of the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights were captured by the Israelis in 1967. They were annexed by Israel in 1981. The world didn't recognize that annexation, but nevertheless, the United States recognized it under the previous Trump administration in 2019. Nobody else does. This is
interesting. Kind of feels crazy that no one else in the world recognizes this annexation except for the United States of America, and nevertheless, Israel continues to annex it. Kind of feels like it necessitates some kind of militant resistance, no?
Is legally Syrian territory, but not to Israel. And the Israelis are determined that they're going to protect that territory with their extended security zone. What this tells me is that whatever happens in this war within a war, the Israelis intend to be in this security zone, I think, for potentially a very long time. That's one potential spoiler. The other potential spoiler, of course, is our old friend, the Strait of Hormuz. The rest of the world really wants a reconciliation to release all the shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. This is what is doing so much damage to the world economy. This is why it matters so much to the rest of us. Well, that's fine. But remember that the Strait of Hormuz will only gradually reopen over a 30-day period as both sides, the Americans and the Iranians, ramp down their respective blockades. And even when they do, we've got 1,500 ships all knotted up, locked away somewhere inside this side of the strait. Those ships have got to get out in some sort of order. And then empty ships, which have been empty for over a month, want to get back in to load up again and get out. Again, what that tells me is it will be several months before the Strait of Hormuz returns to anything like normality, even if there is a deal this week which holds for 30-odd days. And so the Strait of Hormuz remains in this rather strange situation. That's the picture of it from Bandar Abbas on the Iranian side. It's a bizarre situation. Nevertheless, we can be grateful for where we are today. We can be optimistic about that. But the fact is, there are spoilers both in Lebanon and in the Strait of Hormuz, which may temper our optimism.
Stepping back a little bit from today to the week's events, interested in your take. Obviously, there was Operation Epic Fury, then there was briefly...
Legitimately, what could be done on a world stage to get Israel out of occupying southern Lebanon? America. America must restrain and hold Israel accountable. That's it. There's no other way to do this. Whatever America says goes. Anyway, Professor Jiang did... the Diary of a CEO collab, the collab we've all been waiting for. I'm sure there will be fantastic. I'm sure there will be fantastic pieces of information, tidbits about history, even though Jung here doesn't have his whiteboard. Oh, wait, he does. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh my God, he brought his whiteboard. Oh my God. Oh my God. Yes. 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 This is how you're supposed to do it. See, Mehdi Hassan, he actually took away his power. He took away Professor Jiang's power because Mehdi Hassan was afraid of the truth. He was afraid of Professor Jiang's predictive capabilities. Professor Jiang, wow, what a glorious day. What a fantastic day. Where's your whiteboard, loser? I don't have one because I'm bitch made. Okay? That's why people condemn me. That's why the San Francisco Democratic Party is demanding condemnations of me because I don't have a whiteboard, because I can't do predictive history. Okay? I can only predict what might take place in the upcoming months. I can never predict what will take shape in the upcoming decades. Professor Jiang, on the other hand, he predicts not only the past, but also the future. That's right. He has the capabilities of predicting what happened in the past as well. Polymarket fears this man. That's not a prediction. Shut up. It is when predictive history is what we're talking about. Professor Jihad, me, no whiteboard. Professor Jiang, predictive history, yes, whiteboard. Pax Americana, Pax Islamica, and maybe even, what is it? Pax Judaica? Is that what he says? Yeah. That seems a little bit anti-Semitic, so I'm not going to go there, but you know. Professor Jiang, he'll go there. A wise sage, wise beyond his years. My goat, Professor Jiang. Okay, so fake Professor Michael Clark, no whiteboard, says U.S. is desperate to get out of Iran. Let's take a look.
This operation to try and escort boats out of the Strait of Hormuz. How hard was that for the US to actually deliver? Or could they have done had everyone wanted it to continue?
Well, Operation Freedom, to get boats or ships out of the Strait of Hormuz was a very big operation. CENTCOM had been working on it for a long time. They'd worked on it secretly to demine a channel around the coast of UAE and Oman, and it was ready to go. It had taken them a long time to put it together because it was a three-stage plan to work inland in Iran to actually stop anything moving, to then put a dome, as they called it, over the straits itself so that nothing in the straits could threaten any ships moving out, and then to move ships out in a cleared channel. They worked on it a lot. And they began it. They got 2 American-flagged cargo ships out with a couple of American destroyers shepherding them out. And they thought that was the beginning of it. Pete Hegseth said, was it 2 days, 48 hours ago, he said, right, hundreds of ships are now waiting to go through. And within a couple of hours, President Trump had said, no, we're not doing that.
I guess my reason for asking with that point is, do you think, therefore, it stopped because it couldn't or wasn't going to work, or because there was diplomatic pressure, whether it was from the Saudis, whether it's ahead of his trip to China? Why did President Trump stop pursuing that plan when, obviously, as you say, there'd been so much work going into it?
Yeah, I think probably 2 things. One is that it wasn't obviously going to reassure the tanker owners and the crews to give it a go. The idea was, once they see it working, they'll all want to get out, so they will. But we all thought it was a bit of a long shot because it would have to get 1,500 tankers out and then more tankers back in. There's lots of empty tankers out there waiting to go back in to the Gulf to load up again to resume trade. So it was always going to be a long process, and it was a big operation. But I think against that too was the sense that President Trump feels boxed in for diplomatic reasons, and this summit he's going to in China next week, I think, looms large for him. He didn't want to go with this thing unresolved. And, he always expresses diplomacy as if it's a game of cards, as if it's a poker match. And if that's the case, then he looks as if he's folding. He looks as if he's just decided he's got to fold, at least for now. Now, you never predict. Because, even this week, we've gone round a complete circle inside 48 hours. And, my heart goes out to the planners at CENTCOM, Central Command. They're in Tampa and in Doha, the forward base in the Gulf. They must be banging their heads on the desk. All the planning they do, and it's just undercut in a Truth Social post, and everything goes into a different direction. They must wonder, what are we supposed to do with this sort of political direction that we're not...
Breaking Iranian state media reports commercial pier struck near Bandar Abbas. Iranian IRGC-affiliated outlet Fars News Agency reported Thursday that parts of the Bahman Keshem Pier, a commercial and passenger port on the eastern side of Keshem Island, at the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz, were struck during what it described as exchanges of fire between the Iranian forces and the enemy. IRIB also reported sounds of explosions in the area. Further details were not immediately available. Since seizing control of the maritime traffic in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has mandated that vessels transit through a specific corridor located between Keshem Island and Larak Island. Okay? So will this be another tit-for-tat endeavor where both parties, or not Iran necessarily, but America claims that the ceasefire is still holding? Or will this extend into another arm of this now 69-day-long conflict? Wait. We can only wait to find out more, right? We can only wait to figure that part out. We just don't know what the American response will be, because when they announced the new military campaign to transit oil tankers, or at least any commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz by way of the American Navy, there was a tit for tat, and America backed away instantly and chose not to do that again. However, time is running out for Trump to pack this up before his Beijing summit. So I don't know what the calculation here is at all.
Getting.
What's your sense on how optimistic or not we should be about these peace talks?
Oh, I think we've arrived at the point where the United States is desperate to get out and is looking for a way out that can be presented as somehow better than the 2015 deal, which is what Trump departed from, and he wrecked that deal in 2018. And so he's got to find a way of making the deal he might now come to, at least an interim deal, a 30-day ceasefire where they talk about lots of things. In reality, it will look spookily like the 2015 deal, but in slightly worse conditions, because the Iranians now have a more hardline leadership than they had in 2015. They now know how easy it is to block the Strait of Hormuz, to make them unnavigable very, very easily, which they couldn't have done in 2015. The technologies are different. Against that,
that's not true.
One advantage is that
that's literally not true. They have had the capabilities of waging asymmetric warfare since the 90s. Okay? Since the 90s. The only difference now is that their technology has improved, and it's actually less costly. There's less of a human cost, for example. They can do it with go-fast boats, mosquito boats, and commercial vessels that have been reappropriated for military use in their mosquito fleet that they have. But outside, and they have drones as well. But even in the past, since the 90s, they've had the capabilities of utilizing asymmetric warfare and suicide bombing, for example, to be able to render commercial traffic impossible in the Strait of Hormuz. So that's not true. They've always had that capability. They knew they had that capability. It's not like a surprise to them at all. They just never flexed that capability because they always thought they could potentially negotiate with the West, even though there was clearly no ambition from the West, and one might even consider it naivete to assume that you could deal with the West as even partners here. Although the American side was always aware of this capability by Iran, because Iran's capabilities are not just their unique asymmetric warfare fighting style. Their capabilities also come from the fact that there is a limitation in geography here. The Strait of Hormuz only has a 2-mile wide area that these massive oil tankers can transit through. The Strait of Hormuz itself is only 21 miles wide. That's the real limitation here. It is a geographic choke point that 20% of the entire planet's energy needs pass through. The only reason why Iran never did this is because they thought they could deal, perhaps naively, with the Western world through multilateral cooperative agreements, through negotiations. Barack Obama's JCPOA was a sign that this was possible. But ever since Donald Trump came into office the first time around, America has shown time and time again that they have no investment in negotiating with Iran. They have no interest in negotiating with Iran because Trump is unbelievably loyal to Israel. Israel is the country that does not want America to negotiate with Iran. The last time America negotiated with Iran, Barack Obama did so, and Israel very clearly showed that they hated that. Benjamin Netanyahu came to the United States of America, delivered a speech in front of Congress that Barack Obama obviously didn't participate in. That entire speech was shitting on Barack Obama. Many of you are too young to remember this. That was after the JCPOA. That was after Barack Obama successfully engaged Iran diplomatically, created a multilateral agreement. And as a part of that negotiation, we gave Israel a MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, for 10 years. $3 billion a year for 10 years. $38 billion to consistently fund the Iron Dome. And even then, Israel was not happy with the JCPOA. Donald Trump became president. He ripped it apart. And since then, we've turned up the pressure on Iran. And obviously, the last thing that we did was the last attempt at negotiation by Iran and the last instance of perfidy by America and Israel not dissimilar to the events that unfolded in the 12-Day War, was a negotiations process where Iran was seemingly open to concessions on the maximalist demands that Donald Trump had made. And how did they get paid for it? Donald Trump and Israel engaged in a decapitation strike amidst the negotiations process and ended up killing 160 plus little girls at school on the first day of those bombing campaigns. This is what led to Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz and starting their mosaic, decentralized, horizontal defense system, and where they started pummeling the Gulf and pummeling Israel over and over again. That was 69 days ago. Iran has followed us up the escalation ladder this entire time. And even after all of that, there's still an opportunity to negotiate. And yet it seems America is still invested in bombing Iran somehow. And that's where we're at. Fars says, our investigation into Bandar Abbas shows that during the exchange of fire between the Iranian armed forces and the enemy, parts of the commercial area of Bahman Kashimpir were targeted. Some sources, including an Israeli source, have claimed that the UAE fighter jets bombed this dock. A thorough investigation of the dimensions of this incident and verification of the claims made is still ongoing. What I'm gathering so far is that 2 hostile drones were shot down over Bandar Abbas separately. There was an explosion at the Bahman Kashib dock across from Bandar Abbas. A senior Iranian military official also told IRIB that they struck an American ship that was attacking an Iranian tanker in the strait. Israeli journalists have said that Iran may have targeted 2 U.S. destroyers transiting eastbound out of the Strait of Hormuz in response to the U.S. interdictions of Iranian tankers earlier. Developments in the Persian Gulf this evening, as I understand them. Iran recently attacked American missile destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz area while they were making their way out of the strait. The Iranian attack came in response to the fact that a few hours earlier in the afternoon, U.S. military forces attacked Iranian tankers as a part of enforcing their blockade on Hormuz. In Israel, they are closely monitoring the developments in the Gulf. So now the remainder of the Iranian Navy is attacking the American naval assets in the region. This is an escalation. We are moving away. Every step in this direction is a step away from negotiations. We're moving away from negotiations. This, once again, benefits Israel tremendously.
Iranian nuclear facilities are much more destroyed, much less able to reconstruct themselves. So the Iranians are some years away from reconstructing their facilities, but that doesn't stop somebody like North Korea or Russia giving them stuff in the future. And so the threat will remain there. And the Iranians will say, you know, we have no desire to make a nuclear weapon. They've always said that. We know they're lying. They know they're lying. And we'll pretend that we believe them this time. We won't, but we'll pretend we do. And we'll go back to the old process. There's an old phrase in diplomacy: if you can't solve a problem, you manage it. We couldn't solve the Iranian nuclear problem back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And so the world managed it, and it was managed.
That's bullshit, too. I mean, there's 2 different schools of thought here, too. Like, where, number one, what do you mean we have to, like, solve the Iranian nuclear problem? Right? Oh, shit. Donald Trump weighs in on the New York 17 Democratic primary, calling Effie Phillips Daly a fraudster. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I mean, that's a W boost, I think. Yeah, I also responded to Mike Lawler. Oh, they're fucking scared, dude. Oh my God, they're so scared. Holy shit. It's unbelievable. Oh my God. Oh my God. Dude, this is a little bit terrifying. Okay? As you guys know, yesterday I covered this bipartisan representative introduced to combat anti-Semitism online. Jake Tapper had Josh Gottheimer and Mike Lawler on. I said, disgraceful of Representative Josh Gottheimer to collab with the Republican Mike Lawler, who's sitting on a flippable district that I'm actively working in to win for Democrat Effie Phillips Daly. Guess when your highest priority is defending Israel's interests, defeating fascist Republicans is low priority. To which Mike Lawler responded, Hassan Piker says America deserved 9/11 and the Hamas 1,000 times better than Israel. and he would vote for them every single time. Apparently, he doesn't actually understand who lives in my district. Hassan the Hun, I welcome you to come to my district any day and tell the cops and firefighters they deserve 9/11, and tell my Jewish constituents that you support a terrorist organization and we're okay with innocent Jews being slaughtered. Effie for Congress, please make sure you let us know when he's coming to campaign for you. Effie for Congress responded, these are the same cops and firefighters who lost health care because of you, and the same Jewish voters who are at risk because of your endless Middle East wars. Keep talking, Mike. The more you do it, the worse it gets for you. I also responded to Mike, and I said, your constituents like paying $4.50 a gallon so Trump can wage Israel's war? You brutalized your constituents last time you held a town hall, little man. Your days in office are numbered, and you know it. And now, Donald Trump has gotten involved, directly calling out Effie Phillips Staley, our candidate in the race, when the Democratic primaries have not even taken place yet. Why is Donald Trump calling out Effie Phillips Staley before the Democratic primaries have even taken place? Why is Mike Lawler writing bipartisan condemnation bills alongside Representative Josh Gottheimer to call me out? Effie Phillips Staley, so far, is not even the front runner in this. Mike Lawler claims, the petitions filed by Effie for Congress had significant fraud. This morning's ruling, while allowing Effie to remain on the ballot, made clear that her campaign allowed numerous individuals to fraudulently collect signatures. Judge Freed has referred it to criminal prosecution, while some will try to gloss over the fact and say the petition was not permeated with fraud based upon prior case law. The fact that a candidate for Congress would file hundreds of fraudulent signatures is beyond disqualifying. Mike Lawler isn't even going after the other Democrats. Mike Lawler is only going after Effie Phillips Staley. That should say something to you. Now, Donald Trump is also referring to one of the three candidates that are on the Democratic primary side. Why is that the case? Why do you think that's the case? Congressman Mike Lawler is doing a terrific job for New York's 17th Congressional District. Mike will most likely be running against a radical left Democrat named Effie Phillips Staley, who loves high taxes, open borders, anti-Semitism, men and women's sports, and transgender for everybody, among other crazy ideas. Effie Phillips Staley's campaign has just been caught cheating, red-handed, trying to file hundreds of fraudulent signatures to get on the ballot. Justice should be sought, and the fraud should be investigated immediately. Effie Phillips Staley is a fraudster, but the good news is that Congressman Mike Lawler is a winner and has my complete and total endorsement. Mike will never let you down. Oh my God. Will the Democrats recognize what's going on, or will they lean into Trump's attacks and go, actually, Trump is right. We normally would act as though we hate Donald Trump, but in this circumstance, we got to hand it to him. You know the answer? You're 5 seconds to midnight from a direct Trump mention. I think Trump might be one of the few people on the Republican side that's too smart to recognize that highlighting me in any way, shape, or form is only beneficial for me, and therefore he's not doing it. Yeah. Jason Beeferman. Effie for Congress calls Mike Lawler's unsuccessful lawsuit to kick her off the primary ballot embarrassing after a judge ruled in her favor. Today, Mike Lawler was overwhelmingly defeated. His desperate effort to silence thousands of Democratic voters and disenfranchise more than 100 volunteers who powered my grassroots petition campaign. A judge has officially ruled in our favor. My name will appear on both the Democratic and Working Families Party lines for the June 23rd primary. This embarrassing loss exposed the lengths to which Mike Lawler will follow the MAGA playbook to subvert our democracy. As a co-sponsor of legislation to deny millions of American citizens their right to vote, Lawler has once again shown that he is a foot soldier in Donald Trump's attempts to slide our country into authoritarianism and fascism. We are in a pivotal moment in our history, with Trump and Lawler actively trying to tear down the very institutions that protect us. If we are to restore America's faith in democracy, then we must vote MAGA Mike Lawler out in November. Mike Lawler responded to that by saying, what's embarrassing is that the candidate for Congress would pay a firm to hire folks to commit fraud. They hired people registered and living in New Jersey to collect signatures, in addition to faking hundreds of signatures of voters in New York. It was so egregious, the judge referred it to criminal prosecution. While the judge ultimately ruled she had enough valid signatures, the real question is how much fraud is legally permissible, and why are folks, oh, so she did have enough signatures. Okay, got it. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Mike. Why is Mike Lawler and Donald Trump so afraid? Why are they so afraid that they're actively weighing in on this race before the Democratic primary? A Trump-endorsed Democrat, Lamau, the pro-Effie ads are writing themselves? No. Mike Lawler is not a Democrat. Mike Lawler is a Republican. There's a Democratic primary taking place. We got to get Effie Phillips Staley in, okay? Remember, if you can't maintain revolutionary optimism and hold on to like little pockets of hope, do it out of spite, okay? Do it out of spite. The fraud allegations add a wrinkle, but surely Trump condemning a primary candidate is a huge boost to someone whose biggest obstacle is name recognition. No? Oh, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. Are you kidding me? But spite burns quick? Okay, but it can be tinder to ignite your passion. And then you can hold on to pockets of hope. You got a donate link for her? Yes, I do. Chatters have been spamming it already. You're being featured on Pakistani news? Wait, what? Yeah. SecureActBlue.com/donate/Piker to support Effie Phillips Staley. Yeah, I saw this. Mike Lawler and Josh Gottheimer have become quite the team. In addition to their new bill condemning Hassan Piker, last year they teamed up for the anti-IGO bill that would sentence Americans who boycott Israel to 20 years in prison, and another bill to give Israel B-2 bombers. Israel first, man. That's it. There's one party that transcends above all American interests, and that is the Israel First Party. You got Democrats in the Israel First Party. You got Republicans in the Israel First Party. Damn near the entirety of the Republicans, with the exception of Thomas Massie, are in the Israel First Party. And a big chunk of the Democrats are there too. Some of them are too shy. Some of them obviously are too shy to admit it. Okay? Making you the lead write-in candidate against Cory Booker. That's funny. Okay, chatter. You were born there. It's time to reclaim your home. Yeah, sure. All right, let's get back to Iran now for the time being.
It quite successfully. Now, President
Are you going to be a major figure discussion in the midterm elections? Unfortunately, yes.
Trump is discovering the same thing. He can't solve the problem, but he's going to have to manage it. He's going to have to make that management process look somehow different to the one we had before.
Is there another point, or is this not fair, that Iran, both economically and militarily, is much weaker than it was?
Yeah, undoubtedly.
And that, if peace is temporarily held, is a positive, at least for a number of years, if not for a number of decades?
Yes. I don't know about decades, but President Trump could certainly say, look, Iran is much weaker than it was, much weaker. And that's certainly true. But the leadership is stronger. So, he's got a less pliable group of Revolutionary Guard leaders there now. And I do think there will be a reckoning between the population and the government in Iran. I mean, the situation for ordinary Iranians, 90 million of them, and at least 70 million, probably 80 million of them, but at least 70 million of that 90 million, they hate the government, they hate them. And there will be a reckoning, but probably not soon, maybe in a couple of years, maybe 4 or 5 years. There will be a reckoning. And when that reckoning comes, I'm sure it will be very violent, which it might not have been before. But it will occur. I think, President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu will get their regime change, but probably not while they're in office. It'll come down the road. There will be a new Iran emerging out of this, because Iran is in such dire straits economically compared to where it was a year ago.
You mentioned there President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm just interested because obviously before you were talking about how America wants an off-ramp, right? They want to get out of it. What does Israel want now?
Yeah, they don't want the war to stop because Israel's got its own war. So this war within a war is Israel's war on Hezbollah. To once and for all to hit Hezbollah so hard it will demolish it. And Hezbollah is Israel's main opposition, really. I mean, Israel has never bothered too much about Hamas. It suited them to have Hamas in Gaza because it kept the Palestinians split. They're never much worried about the Houthis, who are just a nuisance from their point of view in Yemen. They worried a lot about Iran because Iran was their big problem. And they think if the Iranian problem has now been at least mitigated by the destruction, now their main problem remains Hezbollah. And Israel wants to carry on. This process that we've seen this week has gone on without any real consultation with Israel. And so two things are happening. One is that Benjamin Netanyahu is seeking reassurances from the Trump administration that they won't give in too much, that they will stick to a tough plan on nuclear negotiations, and that getting the highly enriched uranium out of Iran, this 400 kilos or so of highly enriched uranium, must leave Iran to some third country. That's probably going to happen. And that's very, very important to the Israelis. So they've got their issues that they want to press, but they're not in a good position. If Trump needs to make the deal before he goes to China, which he probably does, which is next week, he'll tell the Israelis, you've got to cool it in Lebanon, because the Israelis can be spoilers to what is going on between Tehran and Washington. And the Israelis are very anxious now, I think, to do as much as they can against Hezbollah in the 4 or 5 days they've got left before they're told they must stop.
I wanted to ask Michael just quickly about your view of the US and China's meeting next week and the extent to which Taiwan will be a discussion point as opposed to potentially a military target for China, and whether it's even plausible that President Trump is willing to sacrifice Taiwan over a very long-term time horizon in order to get some kind of agreement with President Xi on other areas.
Yeah, it's entirely plausible. I mean, in the first Trump administration, Fiona Hill, you remember who the British analyst who worked in the first Trump administration, she said very openly, she said that President Trump made it pretty clear to China then that Taiwan was an issue, but it shouldn't stand in the way of better relations between the United States and China and sorting out the trade imbalance between them. I think there's a general sense in China that Trump will not fight a war for Taiwan. On the other hand, the Chinese, they don't want to invade Taiwan. They will if they have to. But what they're doing is I call it the anaconda strategy. They're trying to squeeze Taiwan with military deployments around it. They want to indicate to Taiwan that they're isolated, and sooner or later, Taiwan, it would be better if you made a political decision to come back into the fold. Make it now before it gets worse, before we need to invade you. And I think that's the nature of China's policy, and that's probably a 10-year policy now. Xi Jinping used to say that he wanted it resolved before he stepped down, which is 2027. But he's clearly not going to step down in 2027. He's going for a 4th term at least. So I think we've got until 2031 before it has to be resolved in his mind.
Well, it wasn't even meant to be 2027.
No.
Of course. So,
it's only 2 terms originally.
Yeah.
I mean, like all dictators, they fix the constitution and just keep going extra terms, which he will do. I'm sure he will.
As always, Michael, a pleasure. Thanks so much. We'll chat with Michael again later on in the programme.
Now, according to President Trump, the U.S. has had, quote, very good talks with Iran over the last 24 hours. But the word from inside Iran seems to be mixed. One of Tehran's top negotiators is mocking the president's brief operation to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz. He wrote the, quote, Operation Trust Me, Bro, failed. Sarah?
All right, joining me now is CNN chief international anchor Christian.
Oh, come on. No. Point to the other thing that he said. He called Axios folksios. He said Axios is folksios. Like fake CEOs as well.
And poor. Just let's first start with this. You saw the Operation Trust Me, Bro.
We got to take a L both on the military side and also on the propaganda. Like, how is that fucking possible, dude? Like, that part actually does hurt me a little bit. Like, look, I'm not like a nationalistic person by any means, but it is kind of unbelievable that Iran is not only putting belt to ass when it comes to the military stuff, and is like holding out and is a far more formidable opponent than the Americans clearly thought they would be. But on the propaganda front, it does hurt a little bit. Like, we got the best. We got Hollywood, man. We got Hollywood. How is it that Galabaf has a bunch of like fucking 26-year-olds in his staff and they're writing better tweets? We got nothing. New Trump posts hit the timeline. What did he say? Your shirt's looking weak today? It's bullshit. How dare you? How are they more educated but also better at memes while being better looking and having better style is just not fair? No, their bitches are bad, bro. Their bitches are badder, okay? Their weed, way louder than our weed. How is this possible? What's next? Are they going to fucking start flipping burgers better too? If they invent a better burger, I'm out. I mean, they got Kubide. I guess so. There is that too. They got us on the Kubide side too. It's bullshit, man. It's fucking bullshit. Jennifer Griffin at Fox News, chief national security correspondent for Fox News, says U.S. military just carried out strikes on Iran's Keshem port and Bandar Abbas. Senior U.S. official tells me, but this is not a restarting of the war. More. Okay, so I guess it wasn't the UAE. It was America, or at least America's taking ownership over the strikes on Keshem port in an effort to, I guess, hopefully try to preserve the idea of Dubai. Air defense is now active over Tehran, so they're back. So it's back. It's back on. They're like, no. This is a ceasefire, but you don't understand. This is a ceasefire where we're just continuing to fire. That's just a unique kind of ceasefire that you've never actually experienced before, where we just keep firing, and Iran fires back. So I guess it's not a fucking ceasefire at all.
That was put out by one of the chief negotiators. But you also heard Donald Trump spoke to Fox News on the phone saying this should be wrapped up in a week. So what are you sort of expecting at this point when you hear all these different views at the same time?
Well, I think they are the same views that we've been hearing. First, defiance from the Iranian side and a very sophisticated trolling activity. And secondly, President Trump literally talking all the time to various individual news organizations or in press conferences or whenever the camera is in his face about what actually he thinks is going to happen. What is absolutely clear is neither the United States nor Iran wants to go back to full-scale war. It is not in anybody's interest, neither the US and the rest of the world nor Iran. So now the question has always been, for the last weeks of this ceasefire, who has the highest patience level and pain threshold? And this is what is the big gamble right now, the big sort of wait and see. So if there is this one-page document that will try to open up the Strait of Hormuz, deal with that, President Trump declares victory and then tries to deal and must deal with the nuclear issue, then that seems to be probably more likely. Let us not forget that none of these operations that the United States has tried, the latest being Operation Freedom, so-called, to move boats and escort them out of the strait, has worked. They just haven't worked. In the meantime, the world economy gets worse and worse. Iran is in a whole load of pain economically. There's civilians, the poverty level, the wastage to the, the civilian infrastructure. Obviously, their weapons, systems, and all the rest of it have been dramatically weakened. So the question is now, what is Iran going to say back to the latest U.S. proposal, knowing, as we know, that they are prepared for more war, as they keep saying. They believe it might even be inevitable. The United States doesn't want it, even though it has so much military personnel and weapon systems and everything sort of in that region ready and prepared. So I think that this is, again, a little bit of wait and see. And I think also, let's face it.
Counterpoint to Amanpour. This is the crucial takeaway, says Gregory Brew, senior analyst for Iran and oil at Eurasia Group. The data suggests Iran has months of time before it really feels the crunch, but the capacity of the regime to absorb pain and to mete it out to the populace suggests a longer and perhaps indefinite timeline. So, I mean, this is a little bit of that classic, like, oh, the Iranians are more authoritarian than us, therefore they can hold out. They did this with like the Liberation Day tariffs back and forth as well with China, where they were like, well, China is authoritarian, so they can absorb a lot of the economic shocks. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're talking about waging war against a country, like, yeah, of course they're gonna clamp on members of the population that engage in destabilizing acts. But ultimately, what matters is who gets to hold out for how long. And it is clear that America, or the rest of not even just America, but like the global economy, cannot withstand 4 months of a unlimited blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. They can't. We're not even obviously factoring in the untold amounts of pain that we are subjecting regular Iranians to in the process. But even if you were to calculate the harm being done to, Asian countries and the populations there, something that they did not want to happen at all, something that they had no say in happening at all, we go back to the 3 M's: markets, munitions, and midterms. There's going to be a tremendous amount of domestic pressure. It's already started, where Americans are frustrated with the increase in prices of the gas pump. Markets have done well so far. Record high profits as always. There's a lot of corporate consolidation. However, there are some signals that things are not going too great for every sector, for every industry. Spirit Airlines obviously is gone. It's done. The price of jet fuel was the final blow that destroyed this low-cost carrier. And you have the Shell CEO screaming bloody murder as well for some reason. Right? So even if the market performance is fine for the time being, there are clear indications that things are actually not as healthy as one would assume. And on the munitions front, we already know that America has expended a tremendous amount of its standoff munitions because they can't expend the much cheaper, much more plentiful gravity bombs, unguided and guided gravity bombs that they would be able to deploy if they had full-blown air superiority over the Iranian airspace. So we're going back to square one, which already failed. We know it failed because after 69 days, the strait is still closed. All the while, we lied to ourselves and anyone who would listen that we had destroyed the Iranian strike capabilities. Meanwhile, this new report from John Hudson, this new scoop from John Hudson, proves what I've been saying all along, that America has not been able to successfully diminish Iranian strike capabilities at all. They have 75% of their fucking stockpiles. They've been able to dig themselves out of the cave systems that they were inside of. It has been a spectacular flub, a massive defeat, and yet seemingly the United States of America does not want to turn around and admit that defeat.
The Strait of Hormuz was not an issue before the war started on February 28th. It was not an issue. The nuclear issue was being negotiated at the table the day before the war was started. So now it's almost starting from zero and wondering what you're going to get better than you could have done on the days before the war. Sure, you've got a much weaker Iran, but it's still there and it has consolidated itself around the hardliners. You just said there were demonstrations. Well, those aren't.
Yeah, Fox News is citing a senior U.S. official saying that the U.S. has taken credit for the attacks that were carried out on Qeshm Island and Bandar Abbas, the port, and that they're also claiming that the strikes are not a resumption of the war on Iran. Okay, so what does that mean? Like, you can't just say, oh, this is not a resumption of the war. We're just doing some strikes on Iranian soil. At a certain point, America is using the Israel technique of saying, no, we cease. There's a ceasefire still implemented. You cease, we fire. So now it's absolutely up to Iran to reestablish military deterrence. Is it a ceasefire? Will America continue claiming it's a ceasefire even if Iran starts firing back, as they did so this past week? If you recall, they tried to claim that the ceasefire continued when they did Operation, Prosperity Freedom, or whatever the fuck they claimed they were going to do, where they tried to transit ships from the Strait of Hormuz with naval assets. And then Iran started bombing the United Arab Emirates and also attacked those ships as well. Jennifer Griffin says, the strike on one of Iran's oil ports comes 2 days after Iran fired 15 ballistic and cruise missiles at the UAE Fujairah port, eliciting anger from Gulf countries after top Pentagon leaders said Tuesday that the Iranian strikes did not rise to the level of breaking the ceasefire, calling it low-level attacks that didn't rise to that level. President Trump abruptly called off Project Freedom to open the Strait of Hormuz and guide ships through the strait after announcing the start of the military operations on Sunday. A senior U.S. official confirms to me that WallStreetJournal.com reporting from today that the Saudis and Kuwaitis abruptly halted permissions for the U.S. to use its bases and airspace for Project Freedom, a decision that this official said has been reversed. Saudi officials reportedly were angry at the Pentagon, downplaying the Iranian strikes on Monday. The Gulf states genuinely think, the Gulf states genuinely think that they could just get away with allowing the Americans to utilize their soil to do strikes on Iran or to violate the ceasefire conditions set forth by America and Iran. This makes no sense. They think they can do all of this and not receive any penalties for it. It's unbelievable. America demonstrates this hubris with regular frequency because it's the United States of America. If you're a Gulf state that thinks you're going to be able to get away with behaving like America when you're in striking distance of Iran, well, there's a very different reality there for you. Okay? This is huge and confirms the notion that the Saudis were quietly backing the U.S. war in Iran was a complete myth. It never made sense to start with. Given the eminently predictable, devastating consequences the war has had on Saudi Arabia, why on earth would they have signed up for it? It also confirms that the Saudis, and I suspect many other actors in the region, no longer see the U.S. military presence on their soil as a security guarantee, which is another way in which Iran is winning strategically. Many people were wondering what possible strategic calculus Iran could have in mindlessly bombing all their neighbors, as many were putting it. Well, the whole point was precisely so that those neighbors would do exactly what the Saudis just did. QED. Trump just abruptly U-turned on a plan to reopen the Strait of Hormuz came after Saudi Arabia suspended U.S. access to his bases and airspace. They might reopen it, but if they do reopen it, then Iran will continue bombing the bases. This is necessary for reestablishing military deterrence.
Protesters against the regime, as you pointed out, those are authorized and sanctioned pro-government shows of defiance.
This morning, it is Iran.
Chatters, I'm going to cover the UK election news when there is UK election news. From what I understand, there is no UK election news just yet. Okay?
Move. So there were pro-regime protests erupting in Tehran. You can see them right there as a source tells CNN that Iran is expected to respond today to the latest U.S. proposal to end the war. We are told that a one-page memo is being floated that would formally declare the conflict over and then trigger a 30-day negotiating period to resolve the more serious sticking points, including the nuclear issues, unfreezing Iranian assets, and the future security in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, President Trump has been sounding optimistic. He says Iran has already agreed to some of the sticking points. But the word from Iran certainly more defiant. The parliament speaker there, one of the top negotiators, mocked the president's short-lived operation to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz. He wrote that, quote, Operation Trust Me Bro failed. Let's get to CNN's Elena Treen at the White House this morning. And we're waiting for, white smoke or black smoke to emerge from the White House. We're waiting to hear, frankly. I don't mean to joke about it, but right now it's just a waiting game to hear what Iran says, right?
No, absolutely, and I did appreciate your Pope joke, given that we know the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is expected to meet with him today. But to go back to the topic at hand on Iran, look, we heard from the spokesperson for the foreign ministry in Tehran said that they had received the U.S. proposal, that they were studying it, and the expectation we have gotten from our sources is that they are expected to deliver a response to that proposal today. Now, of course, the Iranians, what we are hearing is that it is expected to be positive. I think a key question, of course, is what is positive for the Iranians is not necessarily positive.
Black smoke means a new gas price has been chosen is great. I mean, it's not great for the people experiencing it, ourselves included, but good joke regardless.
For everyone else. And also, of course, the big question is whether or not what they send back will really line up and match with what, of course, the U.S. has been putting forward. Now, I will say that one thing that we have heard from the president is, he told this to CBS yesterday, to PBS yesterday, in an interview, is this question of highly enriched uranium. He essentially said that we're going to go get it. That has been a huge sticking point throughout all of this, particularly for the Iranians. So there are, of course, still very controversial points to all of this that still need to be worked out. But I will say, at least from the White House perspective, they are cautiously optimistic. They are hoping that the positive feedback they are receiving from the Pakistanis, that the Iranians are moving closer to a compromise, is going to prove to be true. They're also just encouraged by any forward movement in these talks right now. So we are standing by.
I'm waiting I'm watching a Twitch streamer from the U.S. to find out whether the Green Party won my council or not, lol. Yeah, brother. Wait till you find out that the leader of the Green Party is also a friend. And during election night, he was in here, in the American election, obviously. He was in here watching, looking to find out what took place in the American elections. Yep. Zach Polanski, Hasanabi head. We are wherever the working class is. If the working class is international, as it is, then we're there. First results are at 4 p.m. PST, and apparently most results will be coming in tomorrow.
Waiting to see what exactly the Iranians put forth, John.
Do you have any sense of where things stand at this moment?
Based on what I know, and it's not classified information, there is a framework. It's nebulous. It provides, in effect, for an extension of...
By the way, Blumenthal, you might be shocked to hear this, but Richard Blumenthal, unbelievably pro-Israel. You might say, what? Hassan, another Democratic politician, is very pro-Israel? That's unbelievable. Well, it gives me no pleasure to report this, but abso-fucking-lutely he is.
The ceasefire, despite the exchange of hostilities that have occurred over the last 48 hours, the president's saying that the ceasefire continues, but it is more like a path forward than a genuine peace proposal.
So an extension leaving the harder issues until later, like Iran's nuclear program. How would you feel about some kind of signed document today which doesn't deal with the enriched uranium still inside Iran?
A nuclear-armed Iran is unacceptable. I think there's a lot of consensus on that point. But what we're more likely to see as a result of this exchange of papers is simply an agreement to try to seek an agreement. And the president's under pressure because he's going to China on March 14th, and he wants some progress before then. He has made a fundamental miscalculation that bombing alone would accomplish his objectives. Those objectives have been shifting and contradictory, securing the enriched uranium, changing the regime, destroying the missile production capacity, halting the terrorist attacks. None has been achieved because bombing and bombast and bluster are not capable of doing it. So he's under a lot of pressure to extricate the United States and avoid the continuing costs that are imposed on the American people.
So again, and we don't know specifics of this one-page document, but the broad framework, sort of an extension with a discussion on the...
Rest in peace to Ted Turner, but he had a very funny take on this as well. The founder of CNN, for those of you who don't know, the eccentric billionaire Ted Turner, when asked, I believe around the 2000s, when they talked about Iran's nuclear weapons program and how big of a threat it presents to us, Ted famously said, "We have 18,000 nukes. Why can't they have like 10? Who cares?" Now, I'm not saying it. I'm just using a guy who invented CNN and his sentiment on the issue to my advantage. Okay? The U.S. is selling 1,000 Patriot interceptor missiles worth $17 billion to UAE, Kuwait, and Bahrain, despite a U.S. stockpile depleted by the Iran war. The U.S. said last week it was selling $4 billion worth of interceptors to Qatar. All this takes years to make.
Major issues to come. Where would that leave Iran?
Oh, he also, no. It's the full Hasanabi doctrine. He literally then followed up by saying no one should have them, which is my take as well. My take is complete denuclearization across the board. I agree with that. But in the absence of complete denuclearization, nuclear proliferation is the only way to maintain sovereignty if you're a nation in the periphery. That's it.
In terms of the strength of the regime today and tomorrow versus the beginning of February?
Iran is weakened in terms of its missile and drone capacity and its production. But the hardliners are very much in control. It is weakened economically, certainly, but it is in control of the strait, and it's going to insist that it continue to be in control. And the question really is, John, as you've identified it very correctly, will they have some lesser enrichment of uranium, such as the JCPOA contemplate? So where Trump is now headed seems to be very much the JCPOA 2.0, maybe slightly changed, and it could have been the result of negotiations, not a war that was based on a fundamental miscalculation.
Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that essentially the United States holds all.
To be fair, regardless of how pro-Israel Blumenthal is, he was in support of the Iran nuclear agreement. Fair is fair. At the Hasanabi broadcast, we call balls and strikes. Blumenthal was in favor of JCPOA, so I'm glad that he's one of the few fucking Democratic Party congresspersons who's actively calling out that there was a successful diplomatic process that took place under the Obama administration. And I'm talking about like back in the day, in 2015, he announced his support for the Iran nuclear agreement as well.
The cards. Is that how you see it? Does Iran have no cards this morning?
Iran has a...
Were most Dems against JCPOA? I wouldn't say most Dems were against it, but some of them were too shy to let their opinions be known. And there were others who were actively against it, like Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer was literally against the JCPOA, okay? There's levels to this shit. That's my point. There's levels to like Israel dick eating, okay? Some people eat it a little bit. Some people take a little nibble of the dick. Some people full throat it, okay? Some people throat it all the way down. Guac guac 6,000. Chuck Schumer, deep throat, okay?
A lot of cards, and you're seeing them in real time. Americans are paying much higher prices for gasoline, but not just for fuel, also for food, everything from mattresses to medical devices, everything dependent on petrochemicals and plastics. And the world economy is at risk, all because Iran still holds cards. And here's a lesson. You can't count on war being quick and easy. You can't base it on bombast and bluster or bombing alone. And the costs of this war have yet to be fully felt or calculated. And I would just emphasize this point. This administration has concealed a lot of the costs. I've asked repeatedly in classified settings as well as in open hearings, most recently when Hegseth came before the Congress in a hearing last week, what are the costs of this war? And so far they've stonewalled and really stalled us and the American people.
We just put up on the screen there, oil prices are down today, a few more percent on expectations. I think that there will be some kind of agreement. Oil prices are down, gas prices, they should tear up again. I think the national average is about $4.56 a gallon of gas, which is...
Fox News just showed Kyle Kalinske. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. The dark woke brigadier general is finally getting the Fox News noti. The Fox News notice. Oh my God. It's happening.
To add to the division, the Nazi-tatted guy who wants to be the next senator from Maine, Graham Plattner, calling Republicans fascists.
We have multiple paths in front of us. One of them is very
I'm texting
clear.
him.
That is the path of fascism. It is the path of bigotry and hatred, of racism and xenophobia. That is not an option.
This kind of reminds me, Greg, yesterday, what you were talking about with Jessica. Why do you care if I like Donald Trump?
I mean, well, first, like Hamill's image would be meaningless if you didn't have such a connection between
They showed
rhetoric
Jennifer Welsh
and
first and then Kyle. Oh my God, they're coming after other content creators
If they
finally.
didn't act on this stuff, it would be just another inflammatory thing. We all do that, but unfortunately, they lead the league in violent political acts. It's funny, in politics there are two things. There's the message and there's the package. Trump happens to be both together. What you see is what you get. With Democrats, they've always had to kind of like find a package to hide the message. Joe Biden, you know, old statesman, old white guy, hide the radicalism. With Plattner, it's really hard. The packaging with him is the message. I mean, what has he said that mirrors the modern...
You know what's really funny about this? Like, are they just going to highlight all of the fucking goated content creators on this side, like on the commentariat? Kyle Kalinske, Jennifer Welch, myself, don't they realize this is fucking free promo? I guess they don't. I guess their midterm strategy, unironically, is to like attack every left content creator to be like, see, these guys are real bad. They're a real danger. Buddy, we know what you advocate for. We hear your advocacy.
Republicans, but they've always compared Republicans to some kind of existential threat. They've done it with climate change, they've done it with compassion, they do it with Trump. That allows them to label us as amoral. But we know, and Harold would agree, Republicans are not evil. We have a different path to the pursuit of happiness and serenity in people's lives, safety and security. I don't care that you hate Trump. Why should you care that I like him? The answer would be because he's evil. He's like a Nazi. Well, this is where the whole thing falls apart. What does that mean to me if I'm your Republican friend who voted for Trump? That you would believe I would support a Nazi? We've been friends for years. I've been through this. If you're my friend, you have to realize that's illogical, because how were we friends for 10 or 20 years and now you found out I was a fascist? How did that happen? Right. You knew I was a right-winger in the 80s, in the 90s, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can't be seen with him. So the key moment of your in the self-realization of a liberal should be, if your dad loves Trump and you love your dad, shouldn't you maybe question whether your dad doesn't love a Hitler figure, and therefore maybe Trump is not a Hitler figure? And that flaw in your thinking should put into question the reliability on your filter on your life, that this thing is not working. It's not translating. If I love my dad and my dad voted for Trump, but I think Trump is Hitler, there's something wrong with my logic. Your dad is not a Nazi lover. This is why they break off relationships, because when they run into those people that they like and they love, it calls into question that filter.
And you're asking a lot of them to use logic, because they're not obviously using it. They're using emotion, and Trump, for some reason, makes them so emotional. They're breaking up marriages, Jillian.
Well, to be frank, Jesse, well, first of all, I would like to say before I start my...
I think after losing your goddamn mind about me, about Graham Plattner, about like numerous Democrats for the past 2 months, you can't say that the Democrats are being hysterical, right? I just don't think you can keep saying that, because you have behaved hysterically.
You don't have to be in love with them. You don't have to marry them. Like, you just have
Anyway,
to...
I don't care about this. This is irrelevant. I was excited about the prospect of dark woke general Kyle Kalinske getting a mention. But seemingly there is no more mentions of dark woke general Kyle Kalinske. So let's get back to monitoring the situation. And also,
this university in Central...
we will be covering the... We'll be covering the UK elections as well. For all the British out there, fucking hell, the Greens are running an insurgent campaign, taking away the fucking old corrupt Labour Party that has decided to be right-wing, basically fucking Tories. Iran is claiming that the U.S. has broken the ceasefire, vows retaliation. Reports in Iran say a spokesperson for the Qatar al-Anbiya central headquarters accused U.S. forces of violating the ceasefire by attacking Iranian oil tankers near the Strait of Hormuz and launching airstrikes on civilian areas around Bandar to any future attacks. Kind of feels like the ceasefire is over. And the American destroyers in the Gulf, according to Bonserberry from 2 minutes ago, are still under attack. Mehr News Agency says a new explosion has occurred in the city of Bandar Abbas. Informed sources to Tasnim say 3 American destroyers near the Strait of Hormuz were targeted by the Iranian Navy. The attack on the hostile American destroyers was carried out using missiles and suicide drones. I went to my local polling station after work today and did not see another person in the vicinity like 5 to 10 minutes. I was there. Interesting experience during an election. Fucking hell, lad. Fucking hell. Bro, Reform is going to win in a landslide. Unfortunately, normies have fallen for the slop. No, I know. I know that there is a lot of, the Reform is actually popping. I know. I know. It's unfortunate. How does a drone become a suicide drone? Isn't it a robot? Yeah.
Iran is considered by the US and Israel one of the very first stages in Iran's nuclear supply chain. It was struck in mid-March by the US-Israeli campaign, and it's one of dozens of sites across Iran we've been analysing to see how much of its nuclear supply chain has been wiped out. And the answer is not as much as the US and Israel would like. That university you just saw has been under US sanctions since 2012 for researching and developing weapons of mass destruction. It's a reminder of just how long the US has been tracking Iran's ability to make nuclear weapons. And we found that in these latest strikes by the US and Israel, while much of the production process has been substantially damaged, some of the most important parts of this process, the stores of highly enriched uranium, may not have been touched at all. Let's start at the beginning of the supply chain. Alongside the research, the process starts at places like these, Saghan Uranium Mine, where the raw material, uranium ore, is mined. In recent years, Saghan Mine has expanded significantly. You can see widening pits, growing piles of earth, and diggers. We looked at recent imagery since the latest strikes and found no evidence of damage. In fact, from between the clouds, you can still see diggers operating at the site. So far, this indicates this stage of the nuclear supply chain may remain untouched. Next, the mined uranium ore is transported to production plants like this one in Ardekan. Here, it's converted into yellowcake, which is a type of concentrated uranium. We found this plant was substantially damaged in recent strikes on March 27th. An image taken the following month shows little change, suggesting the Iranians have not rebuilt this site yet. After this, the yellowcake is taken here to sites like this one in Isfahan to be purified and converted into uranium hexafluoride. And it's this stage of the supply.
This is only one element of the war efforts, right? On the one hand, it's clear that the Iranian nuclear capabilities have not been destroyed in the way that America suggested. And on the other hand, there's a far more damaging truth. According to the Washington Post report that just came out, something that we knew already by looking at the different, not always so easily readily available commercial footage, that Iran has been unbelievably successful in basically cratering certain U.S. bases in the Gulf and even destroying American assets, very expensive assets like satellites. Or not satellites, sorry, radar and early advanced warning detection systems. So they've been able to effectively shut off the United States' network of eyes and ears in the region. And this has also diminished the Israeli early advanced warning systems that play a role in this network that defends Israel, that plays a role in the Iron Dome. So both on the offensive capabilities, they have not achieved their results. And also on the defensive side, it's been an unbelievable failure from the American side. Scoop, POTUS met privately with the Nelk Boys today. The popular YouTube influencers support him in 2024, according to a White House official. Oh my God, they are so fucking desperate. That is hilarious. This is what this fucking dumbass is doing as the world is on fire. Fantastic.
Supply chain that has caused the biggest headache for the US and Israel. Back last June, French outlet Le Monde found this truck visible in imagery taken just days before the strikes. These blue containers are likely carrying uranium into the tunnels, experts told CNN. Days later, these facilities were substantially damaged in Israeli attacks. You can see several buildings wiped out. Then, in early 2026, Iran covered over several entrances to these underground tunnels with earth, preventing people from accessing them. Further measures were taken this April when these roadblocks were put up in front of the entrances to the tunnels. It could suggest there still remains something valuable down there. They were not, however, hit in the latest US-Israeli strikes. Even experts we spoke to are unsure why. David Albright is a world-leading expert on nuclear weapons. How much of a risk in the future is that stores in Isfahan Mountain?
Well, I think it's a big risk. That's quite a bit of money in the bank. I mean, the amount of enriched uranium they've produced was equivalent to a full years of production of their entire enrichment complex, and is believed to be mostly, and almost all of it, at Isfahan.
In fact, the US believes this too, and their demand to remove this uranium has been a key issue in the stalling peace negotiations. and finding out exactly how much is down there is central to determining whether Iran remains a nuclear threat. Katie Pugliese, CNN, London.
What is important to understand is there are a lot of different components of the nuclear program. There's the supply chain, there's the nearly 1,000 pounds of uranium enriched up to 60%, which is the Iranians still have buried underground. Very difficult, in fact, for U.S. Aircraft to strike, even with big GBU-57s. It's just buried beneath the earth. And then there are other things that weren't in that, like scientists. The Iranians have scientists, so there's nuclear know-how. The Israelis have killed a little bit over a dozen Iranian nuclear scientists, but there's still many out there. So there's knowledge that still persists as well.
Yeah, I mean, it just, you know, impossible to just kind of eviscerate or obliterate the whole thing, obviously, as had been put out there. Now, Iran said today, Seth, something I wanted to ask you about. That, you know, yesterday, we know that the UAE was hit by a large number of missiles and drones, okay? In fact, almost the most since the quote-unquote ceasefire even began. And Iran then said that their armed forces did not carry out any attacks on the UAE, but the UAE says they did, right? And there was obviously evidence of that as well. There was a major oil port in flames, and the UAE says it was 19 missiles and drones yesterday. So what is going on here? And I know you're learning something new about that really could change, in a sense, one of the core trajectories of this war.
Yeah, Aaron, it looks like Iran is trying to publicly make it seem like this is a war between Iran and the United States. The reality, as we look at what Iran has conducted attacks against, or who it's conducted attacks against, even the last day or two, it's conducted strikes against the Emiratis and against Oman. Targets in Oman and their ships as well, including a South Korean tanker. So the number of countries that have been hit has grown. I mean, my sources are telling me that there is growing unhappiness within Gulf states who are increasingly looking at options to become more militarily involved, not just in defensive operations, but in offensive operations, including with potential for airstrikes. I mean, I understand that already one Gulf state has likely already conducted strikes in unpopulated islands in the Gulf as a signal that it could escalate. So I think we are on the verge of potentially seeing some escalation by Gulf states.
Joining me now is physicist David Albright, the president and founder of the Institute for Science and International Security. He is also a former nuclear inspector. Thank you so much for being here. First, when you...
Bro, so much of this conversation unironically revolves around, is Iran legally allowed to strike back? Okay. It's just like, is that allowed? Is Iran legally allowed to strike back? Find out more at 7. You know? Why is Iran allowed to hit American military bases and countries that are allowing American military to operate as they use the airspace of these countries to hit Iranian soil?
Look at the images, satellite images, about Iran's nuclear capabilities and what you know about its capabilities from before all of this. What do you glean from all this?
Well, one is before the war started in June, Iran was able to build a nuclear weapon, if it decided to do so, within months and have high certainty it would work. Now, they aren't able to do that. I mean, there's intelligence assessments that have become public recently that say they'll need it a year. I would probably say perhaps longer, but more importantly, the weapon may not work. That much of the nuclear weaponization infrastructure of Iran's program has been destroyed. So it's not just the enriched uranium that matters. That's critical, and that's really the centerpiece of all the negotiations right now. But the ability to make the bomb itself is important. So I think Iran has been seriously set back, and instead of us facing a program where at any moment Iran could decide to build a bomb quickly within months, now we're with a program that, if it decided to build a bomb, would take more like a year, and there'd be roadblocks along the way that would have, they would be facing their own uncertainty of whether they could succeed. And so the probability that it wouldn't work would be potentially substantial. So I think the war created quite a bit of damage to the program.
Yeah, there are a lot of damaged facilities, from the university where the research for a nuclear bomb was done to many of the other places that helped facilitate the creation of nuclear weapons. I do want to
Cope and justification for war crimes. That's what this is. First is cope, where it's like, oh, the Iranian nuclear capabilities have diminished or whatever. It's cope because it's not even a significant factor in the Iranian calculation. The nuclear program, or the enrichment of the uranium, was entirely done as a negotiation, as leverage in the negotiation process. And a justification for the war crimes comes from the attack on wait, hold on. Doors open. Doors open. Sorry. The justification of attacking universities is a justification for war crimes. It's a civilian facility. It's ridiculous. It's no different than like blowing up MIT or some shit. Okay, but of course, because it's Iranian, we get to entertain how valid this is. It's fucking bullshit.
ask you about sort of what's happening right now. The Secretary of State says that the combat part of the war is over. The president says just this morning that negotiations are underway, or they're promising. If the goal is to keep Iran from nuclear weapons capabilities, what must be part of the agreement when it comes to how it's handled, when it comes to how Iran is moving forward or not with their...
When did the United States bomb a university? They bombed multiple universities in Iran alongside Israel.
Nuclear program.
Well, there's a couple things. One is the enriched uranium stocks that Katie pointed out are very important, and those have to be part of a deal to preferably, from a U.S. point of view, remove the enriched uranium from Iran, and you want to create further roadblocks on Iran's ability to build the bomb, and that's a very good way to do it. Another part of it, though, is that Iran has to they've got to commit not to build nuclear weapons, and I, from my point of view, they've got to admit that they do it. They always deny it, but we know they've been working on nuclear weapons for decades, and so you have to have a commitment not to do it, and then you have to have some good inspections that verify that the program has ended. And so I think that's, and I see from some of the reporting that the Trump administration is considering that, but that's always one of the hardest things for Iran to accept, because I think no matter what they want to be able to reconstitute to build nuclear weapons, to have that option, if not actually implement it. And these negotiations have to just end that ambition on the part of Iran. The war has made that goal much harder for Iran to accomplish, but it didn't end it.
We're looking at some imagery here of some of the bombings of Esfahan, and also, though, where the uranium is mined, and it looks like
Iran is providing more info than the Pentagon. Iran's Joint Military Command says the U.S. carried out airstrikes in civilian areas with the cooperation of some regional countries. Amazing that Iran's military is putting out more information on potential U.S. military strikes than the Pentagon itself. No, they have. They have.
It's more and more of it has been mined since those initial strikes.
They've openly recognized it now.
Do we have any sense of how much enriched uranium there is, and how difficult it would be because Iran, that's the one thing they do not want to do, is give that up?
In this round, Israel took out the facility that could take that, and it's uranium ore. It's not uranium per se. Uranium is maybe 1% or less of the ore, and you have to process that at a facility. And Israel destroyed that facility in this round. And Katie pointed that out in her story.
Is it again Iran's restraint being perceived as weakness? Every time. That's a constant. Just remember. Iran says yes to ceasefire negotiations. America perceives that as weakness. Iran doesn't go up the escalation ladder to create sufficient military deterrence. That's seen as that's perceived as weakness.
The International Atomic Energy Agency knew very precisely how much enriched uranium Iran had right before the war started in June 2025. The uncertainty now is how much of it is inaccessible. Some amount was in the Fort El Mountain, which was heavily destroyed by the U.S. bombing. Any highly enriched uranium there, enriched uranium is probably hard to assess. The IA's reported that over half is in these Esfahan mountain tunnel complexes, but we don't really know how much the bombing in June destroyed some of that. So I think the uncertainties are on how much is left that is accessible to Iran, and it's probably significant. So it is right that's a centerpiece of the negotiation. Now,
yeah, while we're having this conversation, the U.S.-Israeli strikes are still ongoing, by the way. The iron law of U.S.-Israeli foreign policy is that the Iranian government is at all times, A, not going to survive the year, and B, 16 seconds away from being a nuclear power. Statement from the spokesperson of Iran's armed forces central headquarters of Hazrat Khatam al-Anbiya says the U.S. violated the ceasefire. I already covered that. The U.S. will start revoking passports this week for parents who owe $100,000 or more in child support and will soon expand the policy. Once again, Donald Trump is attacking his own base for some weird reason. Don't really understand why, but good luck, I guess. Like, who could this be for other than the biggest family court victims of all time, Republican dads? Like, I don't have an issue with this policy. I don't understand why it exists, but I will say that it's an interesting policy because I feel like it will end up hurting the base more than anybody else if we're keeping it $1.50. Very strange.
The question: why didn't the United States and Israel further destroy these mountain complexes? There's two that could hold enriched uranium, and I mean, the only answer I could default to right now is they wanted to make sure that in an end.
This is the Operations Centre of UK Maritime Trade Operations, UKMTO. It tracks commercial shipping in contested waters around the world, off the coast of East Africa.
Did they forget what Joe Kent said? Why are they still insisting on Iran getting a nuclear bomb bullshit? Brother, I don't know how to explain this to you, and perhaps one day you will understand, but they're fucking lying, okay? They have to create reasonable, probable cause for why we're engaging in this kind of military action and why gas is now $4.50 in Mike Lawler's district.
Here in the Red Sea, and critically right now in the Strait of Hormuz. We can see it here, the hazardous area boxed off. These red lines are effectively Iranian border control. They've told all vessels inside this zone they need to get out or face attack. And if and when those attacks are to come, this is where those ships will call. They come in on a phone number that's on the bridge of every commercial vessel. This is like 999 for cargo ships and tankers in trouble.
Can you confirm the name of the vessel again to me, please, sir? And how can I help you?
Information received here is shared with ship owners, with coalition partners, with regional search and rescue where necessary to coordinate help if required. And crucially, it is shared publicly so that other vessels can react accordingly to any danger. Now, since the war began, they've seen transits through the Strait of Hormuz come down from 130 a day, 65 or so in each direction, to just 10. And in the last 48 hours, since Donald Trump abandoned US plans to escort vessels and diplomatic progress appears to be being made, well, 0 vessels have made that transit.
We're taking calls from merchant vessels from contested waters, particularly where they feel they might be under threat of attack or they've seen something suspicious. We cover all the threats that are available in that area, so from piracy to state action to terrorist action. We're sharing verified and can be alarms going in the background, sirens, and sometimes we've even heard shots as well. So our watchkeepers are trained to keep clear and calm at all times. Until there is more certainty on how safe it is and where it is safe for their seafarers to go, they are not able to make those movements. So they're really looking for leadership and stability before they can start to recover. And we'll need to start with some kind of evacuation, humanitarian evacuation, because we've got around 20,000 seafarers who are stuck inside the straits at the moment.
With more than 800 vessels stranded on the western side of the Strait of Hormuz, even if and when the waters are safe, it will take weeks for them to clear and months before global supply lines return to normal. And here, they'll watch all that happen.
And we are seeing those historic swings in the price of oil with every headline about the Iran war. And now we have learned that the Justice Department is investigating a series of suspiciously timed trades just ahead of major announcements about the war by President Trump. Sources tell ABC News that the DOJ, along with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, are probing at least 4 trades in the oil market where traders made a total of more than $2.6 billion betting that oil prices would drop right before they actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that being a fucking excellent trader was illegal. Okay. In this circumstance, it might literally be illegal, but whatever, dude. I didn't realize we were punishing greatness. Also, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is not going to investigate shit because the people that are making these incredibly strategic decisions to make the perfect bets at the perfect time, they're making these fucking decisions because they're in these rooms.
Starting on March 23rd, data from the London Stock Exchange showed just 15 minutes before Trump posted that he would delay attacking Iran's power grid, traders bet $500 million that oil prices would fall. On April 7th, a few hours before Trump announced a ceasefire, nearly $1 billion in bets on oil dropping. Similar pattern on April 17th, $760 million in trades just 20 minutes before Iran announced the Strait of Hormuz was open. And on April 21st, 15 minutes before Trump extended the ceasefire, traders bet $430 million oil would go down. We do not know the identities of these traders, but these are very big payouts, raising concerns about insider trading. The CFTC and DOJ are not officially commenting, guys.
It shouldn't be too hard to figure out who made the trades, and that is definitely suspicious. All right, thank you so much for that, Elizabeth.
Millions of people across Britain are going to polling stations to cast ballots in a set of elections for more than 100 local councils across England and for semi-autonomous parliaments in Wales and Scotland. This is the biggest set of elections since Prime Minister Keir Starmer swept to power in a landslide in July 2024. And opposition parties are painting these votes as an unofficial referendum on Starmer and his Labour Party centre-left government. Labour is defending about 2,500 local council seats in England and is the incumbent government in Wales, but is bracing for heavy losses across the country in this election. That would be very bad news for Keir Starmer, whose personal approval ratings as well as his government's approval ratings have been in the doldrums for months. That's due to a range of factors, including a sluggish economy and a series of policy U-turns and miscalculations that have raised questions about his political judgment. Among these is his decision, which backfired, to appoint Peter Mandelson, a friend of Jeffrey Epstein, as Britain's ambassador to Washington at the start of Donald Trump's second term. A very bad result for Labour in these elections could trigger a move by his own Labour Party to oust him and replace him with another leader. If Labour is likely to be the big loser in these elections, the big winners are expected to be what have been called the insurgent parties. There's Reform UK, the hard-right party led by Nigel Farage, and the Green Party, which has expanded from its environmentalist base to become what's been called an eco-populist party under its young leader, Zach Polanski. Political experts say these elections may mark a major milestone in Britain's shift from a two-party system, dominated by Labour and the Conservatives, to a much more multi-party and even chaotic form of politics.
So I'm delighted now to be joined by the leader of the Green Party, who's in Cardiff as we speak. Zach, very, very good to see you. I would imagine that you are... it's always a pleasure to see you. Thanks for joining us. I would imagine that you are somebody who believes that it's really important to restore trust in politics and politicians.
I think it's incredibly important. And actually, I heard comparisons then to me and Nigel Farage, and I just think those comparisons are completely unfair. Nigel Farage took a £5 million donation before he was an MP. I realise I've made mistakes. I'm a human being, but I think the comparison is probably a little bit unfair. More generally, I do think it's important that all of us in public life make sure that we act with integrity, that we're honest and that we're held accountable.
I mean, obviously there are big issues of integrity which all voters would want to see all our leaders adhering to, but also just sort of, you know, essentially people being straight with us. I mean, I genuinely don't understand how you could confuse being somebody who helped the Red Cross to raise a bit of money with being a spokesperson. I mean,
bro, this is dude, I hate British media so much. Okay. What they're hitting him with is the dumbest story of all time. Okay. They're claiming that Zach Polanski was misleading the public about being involved with the British Red Cross because he said he was a spokesperson and he was never an official spokesperson for the British Red Cross, but instead actually did a bunch of charity fundraisers where he spoke at the Red Cross. I cannot fucking believe that the comparison between Zach Polanski in this circumstance and Nigel Farage is Nigel Farage getting bribed to the tune of £5 million versus Zach Polanski saying, "Oh yeah, I did a bunch of events with the Red Cross," and claimed that he was a spokesperson, even though he wasn't a spokesperson in an official capacity. The standards are so out of whack, man.
I think it's a sort of big deal in itself, but it all adds to this erosion of trust. How did you get that wrong?
I think that's been over-exaggerated. So I hosted events for the British Red Cross. I would go on stage with them with a set of points they would want me to make around protecting refugees, around the amazing work they do with dealing conflict zones, and also, in fact, the climate crisis in this country. This was in 2016. I accept that the British Red Cross cannot have a spokesperson who is in a political party, so they need to have that distinction. I understand why they've said that. But I think there's a little bit of pedantry between I spoke on behalf of the Red Cross as a public representative at events and I was a spokesperson. So, I got the wrong word, but I think to most people, they can understand that. I think most people are reasonable.
But you do seem to have a sort of slight habit of getting the wrong words. I mean, on the BBC this morning, you talked about the alleged terrorist being handcuffed, but he wasn't handcuffed by the police, was he?
Well, he was tasered and immobile.
Is this a joke? British chatters. I'm being pranked, right? Like they're showing this is a joke where they're basically like, haha, look at how silly we can get with unbelievably improper framing. Like, haha, this is what it would look like if we were genuinely terrified of an ascendant insurgent left flank candidacy and are actively trying to undermine it. Like, haha, this is the level that we would go to. Yeah. It must be that dry British humor I hear so much about. And I'm just incapable of understanding. This can't be sincere commentary, right? I choose not to believe that.
And with his face down. And again, I think when you're being honest, when things are moving quickly, again, you will make mistakes. But I think it's important to be clear about the mistakes you've made. And again, I repeat, I'm a human being. I'm fallible. It's been a long election campaign. And I think, most people can hear what I'm trying to do and that I'm out there. Green Party councillors have two vested interests. We want to protect the people that we're elected to serve in their communities, and we want to protect the planet. And that's what I'm doing every single day.
As I say, it's not so much any individual thing, but it's the sort of cumulative thing. So, I mean, another thing which I think most people would say is a bigger issue is, a significant number of your candidates have said things that are completely explicitly anti-Semitic. And I think, many voters don't understand why they have not just been expelled.
Do you guys ask questions like this to Reform? A party comprised almost entirely of neo-Nazis? Or is this just a level of smoke that only the left receives? Isn't it wonderful how anytime there's a left party, by the way, magically they are found guilty of maximum anti-Semitism? It's always the same with Jeremy Corbyn, now with Zach Polanski. This time they're doing it to a Jewish guy, which is even crazier. How fortuitous. The enemies of capital are always found guilty in the eyes of not necessarily the public court of opinion, but certainly mainstream media of engaging in heinous levels of bigotry specifically anti-Semitism. It's always, I don't know what it is. It's so crazy though. How fortuitous for Reform that they have an infallible track record and they're just simply never caught doing bigoted stuff. Huh. Interesting.
I do think this is a different conversation because the things we were just talking about, I don't think are particularly very serious issues. The case of anti-Semitism, though, is incredibly serious. And I know you'll associate with this too, Robert, but Jewish safety is not some abstract idea for me. In fact, personally, in the last 6 weeks, 2 people have been arrested in relation to anti-Semitic events towards me. One was anti-Semitic.
Yeah. Robert's about to be like, yeah, but don't you think you deserved it? Sure, you've been a victim of anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic hate crimes, but don't you feel like you deserved it a little bit, Zach?
And by the way, homophobic as well. And so it's really, really important that everyone gets a grip on anti-Semitism. It exists in political parties because it exists in society. Something I've already committed to during this election is to make sure we have a better
But if you're committed to
standardised-
zero tolerance on this issue, why not just boot these? I mean, there's no ambiguity. These people said this stuff.
What? Like what? What did they say? YouGov poll, Reform and Labor are seen as more anti-Semitic than Greens. Oh, thank God. Thank God, dude. Holy shit. At least the people are not eating this stuff up. And I think it's because Zach is Jewish.
On social media, at that point, they should just be out the party, shouldn't they?
Well, we're a decentralized party where the leadership doesn't have any say over the disciplinary process. What I have committed to, though, is making sure we have better standardized vetting process. Yeah. Because we're a decentralized party, I still think it's important that the leadership comes from the top to say this is what we should be looking for and not looking for from our candidates. And also that there's compulsory training for all councillors and indeed future candidates as well. It's not acceptable that people have made anti-Semitic comments. I also think, by the way, it's not acceptable that some of the political parties have used anti-Semitism as a political football. It's a sensitive issue that needs to be treated with care. I do want to thank the Labour MPs that have shown me solidarity, that there's been several anti-Semitic caricatures of me in the last 48 hours in the press, including a terrible one from the Times, which they've still not apologised for. And I do thank the Labour MPs, I think, who are showing leadership in saying, even though we're from different political parties, we need to show cross-party working on this and make sure we stamp out anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all forms of hate crime from our society. I think the kind of using it to score political points has been pretty grim in this election. And as a Jewish person and someone who's very committed to an anti-racist party, it's been deeply upsetting.
No, of course it is. But there's a different aspect of all of this. I mean...
Of course it is. But don't you feel like you deserve it? Of course it is. But, you know... Don't you feel like you kind of deserve it a little bit? I mean, come on, Zach. Sure, they portrayed you in a way that harkens back to the Nazi era depictions of Jews, but don't you feel like you brought it on a little bit?
You know, like me, you say you're very proud of being a Jew. Doesn't it worry you when you see attacks on you from many members of the Jewish community, not just those on the right, you've got to be absolutely clear about this, who believe that your slowness in dealing with anti-Semitism in your party, I mean, they say it makes them feel less secure.
It's really upsetting when anyone's attacking me for anti-Semitism because, as I say, I'm really clear, anti-Semitism is unacceptable. And as I've said, we need to make sure that we have a standardised vetting process in the future. More widely, I would say, if we're going to get to the issue of left and right, is that I do think there's another angle here, which is I've been a very proud voice also speaking up for the Palestinian people. Now, we know you can perfectly well speak up for Palestinian people, as I have, and not be anti-Semitic. I also accept that often those lines can get blurred. But I think people like Benjamin Netanyahu, who have made a point of conflating anti-Semitism and criticism of the Israeli government, have actually made many of us, I feel this, less safe in this country because we've lost that demarcation of it's different being a British Jew and someone who doesn't support the Israeli government.
But there's somebody who, you know, you say you've got absolute clarity on what it is to be anti-Semitic. You say you've got a devolved structure in the Green Party, but aren't there just some...
I'll be honest. I will admit this over and over again. I cannot believe how much worse it is in British media. Like, British media is actually, maybe it's because of the consolidation of power. It's all Oxbridge people, right? It's all people representing their class interests and stuff. But the way that they talk about this stuff, the way that they so shamelessly hammer on the point of Jewish safety as though it's at odds with Palestinian safety. It's unbelievable. I cannot comprehend it. It's just so much worse. This is like, you guys think about like Jake Tapper, right? Jake Tapper is an op of mine and is incredibly, Jake Tapper is vile, right? With his Islamophobia and very smarmy, very elitist with the way that he communicates on certain issues, right? However, it's British media is like every day is Jake Tapper all the time, times 1,000. Like, British media makes Jake Tapper look like a humanitarian rights worker in comparison. It's actually crazy. Like, I don't think if Jake Tapper did this in American news against like Bernie Sanders, people would probably call him out. People would be like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude? Calm down, you know? Whereas this is all I've seen from the attacks that Zach Polanski has endured. It's like, it's literally every time he goes on a TV show, they're like, don't you feel like you're the #1 Jew hater in London? Don't you feel like the Green Party is running around saying, Sig Heiling every day, all the time? Don't you feel like if you win that you're going to trigger a Holocaust too? This time in London directly? The fuck? It's bizarre.
Some issues which actually you should have the power to simply take decisions on in a centralized way.
Well, I look for expertise on issues of disciplinary processes, and the Equality and Human Rights Commission, along with Martin Ford, when they looked into anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, one of their key recommendations was that the disciplinary process had to be completely separate from the leadership. Otherwise, you have leaders wading in, deciding who's guilty, who's not guilty, based on who they might want to select or deselect. And I'm not saying I do that for a second. In fact, I'm doing the very opposite. But actually, I think it's wise in all political parties that the disciplinary process is robust, that it's secure, and it's my job to make sure that that process is secure. But it's not my job to wade into disciplinary complaints, because that road is chaos.
In just a second, I'm going to move on to a different subject, but just on this issue of what it is to be a Jew in today's Britain, you describe yourself as a non-Zionist Jew. What do you mean when you say a non-Zionist in these circumstances?
Well, just first of all, to pick up on you saying it was grim, there was polling out today, which I know you saw as well, that said 40% of British people in this country don't think the country would necessarily be better or worse if Jews left the country. That's deeply depressing, and I think that should be sobering for anyone in public life to look at what do we do to make sure.
Jesus Christ. Okay, what the fuck? Wait. God damn. Okay, wait, hold on. Half of these motherfuckers are like, oh, it's the Labour Party under Corbyn that's anti-Semitic. Oh, it's the Green Party. Meanwhile, it turns out it's everybody. That number does not exist in America. Like, there's no world. I've talked about this before. Like, Americans love Jews by and large. Like, sure, they have some anti-Semitic tendencies, anti-Semitic opinions and stuff like that. But Americans love Jews. It's the one religion that has the highest approval rating amongst all religions in the United States of America, consistently, year over year. Okay? The attitude I jokingly refer to amongst Americans is, yeah, Jews control Hollywood, but they made Seinfeld, right? Like, that's kind of like the attitude overall. Like, the average guy is like, yeah, Jews are, they control the banking stuff, but like, they're pretty good at money. And yeah, Jews control Hollywood, but they make great TV shows. Like, that's genuinely the sentiment from like the normie American, okay? But if you got like a country that's saying, 40% of the population is like, yeah, if Jews would leave or if they stay behind, who gives a shit? I don't really give a fuck. You got a real problem. And I don't think it's the Greens. I don't think it's the party being led by a Jewish guy. You got to start knocking on different doors, brother. Your unlimited appetite for Israel's death and destruction campaign has caused you to not realize that there is actually a fucking anti-Semitism problem. Okay? There is. It's just not, you're pinning it on a guy who is Jewish himself. You're pinning it on probably the least anti-Semitic party out of all of the major parties. Yeah, British press, there's a dangerous epidemic of anti-Semitism in the country. Jewish political leader, we should tax the wealthy and stop doing war crimes. British press, he's a hook-nosed Judeo-Bolshevik parasite who's conspiring to subvert our society. Like, it's insane, brother.
The Jewish people are welcome in this country.
He's been on the receiving end of heinous cartoons. Like, let's be real, okay? Cartoons are cartoons. Some have the tendency to, like, if you're making people look grotesque, no matter what. I mean, this is an ancient tradition, just like anti-Semitism, ironically enough. Sometimes when you make someone look grotesque, when you're making a political cartoon, it's gonna look, anti-Semitic. And this is one of those instances, right? But my point is, if this wasn't Zach Polanski, if this was someone who was pro-Israel, for example, if it was a Jewish person who was pro-Israel, for example, or even a non-Jew that was made to look this way, but is a, prolific pro-Israel non-Jew, the media would go crazy over it. They would be talking about it endlessly. They'd be like, look at what they're doing. It's their Stormer. Radio Rwanda was just making jokes too. What? American Jews have a safe and secure homeland. It's called America. The only thing making them less safe here is Israel. Wait. Buddy, I'm not defending the cartoons. I'm saying even under the most fair and balanced approach here, it's still very clearly harkens back to a bygone era that I thought was gone, but I guess it's back in a big way. But I'm also talking about the unbelievable double standard here. The same British media would lose their fucking minds if it was a pro-Israel person being depicted that way, Jewish or not Jewish. They'd be like, this is a heinous anti-Semitic hate crime. Okay? What the fuck is Hesa Papa? Hesa Papa? Hesa Papa, thank you for the raid. A raider. Mazlik Aya, thank you for the raid. You already know. Mers licks balls. Okay? You tell me that Mers licks balls, you're good in my book. Schlupen das! Merz! Schlupen das! Das ist Vitamin! Unka German? Whoa there. What the fuck is wrong with you? I said, suck this, this is a vitamin. Schlupen, it's schlucken. Sorry. Schlucken das! Das ist Vitamin!
Being an anti-Zionist or a non-Zionist, it's ultimately recognizing that I want to see equality for the Palestinian people, that there's been a genocide for the last couple of years, that our government have been arming and sharing intelligence. I want to see an end to that genocide, and I want to see equality of voices at the table in making sure that we're building peace.
I mean, some, again, in the Jewish community would say you shouldn't there is an international criminal court case going on, and they would say you shouldn't be judging whether it's a genocide or not as a political leader until the case, or in fact cases, are heard. But just to be clear, because this is something of enormous importance to the Jewish community, as somebody...
Oh, I didn't know it was like that. Oh, my bad. No, you can't call out shit, Excuse me. It doesn't matter that Israel committed a genocide and everyone knows it and everyone has called it out at this point, every humanitarian rights organization. Don't you feel like you should stay quiet? Yeah, let's wait another fucking decade, dude. Let's let him get another genocide off, you know what I mean? Let's let him do one in Lebanon too, and then maybe then the Gaza one we can actually finally say is a genocide. At which point, don't say anything about the Lebanese genocide if that happens, Also, the thing that's really fucking annoying about this conversation is then these guys will also tie this back up to Jews, where they're like, well, don't you feel like it's hurtful to Jews? Buddy, what the fuck does this have to do with the Jews? What do you mean? Don't you think it's hurtful to Jews to acknowledge the international consensus on every humanitarian rights organization's assessment on Israel's genocide? Like, what the fuck does that have to do with Jews, man? What an insane thing to just be like, well, don't you feel like Jews' feelings get hurt if you say Israel's committing a genocide? Okay, well, that's an unbelievably anti-Semitic assumption to make. But also, why does that matter? Like, actually, why does that fucking matter? Why would that matter? Like, the idea that, like, oh, we can't do... Sorry, we can't do desegregation in our school system because, you know, what if white people's feelings get hurt? Like, oh, you can't say that the Jim Crow laws are racist because white people's feelings are getting hurt. Okay, I don't give a fuck, man. That's a thing they got to deal with on their own if that's the case, right? You know, build a fucking bridge and get over it. Get the hell out of here.
Damn, this guy's good.